Good evening. Noting the time and the presence of quorum, I'd like to call this April 3rd, 2023 meeting of the Acton Select Board to order. We'll start with residents' concerns. Any residents that have issues they wish to bring before the board that are not addressed in tonight's agenda, please come forward.
I'm Ann Chang from South Acton, and I'd like to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. It's called the future. And I will say that we kept Adams Street for about 35 years before it was used, and we fought two battles because people wanted to sell it. There's very little land left in Acton, and one parcel of the whatchamacallit farm was bought for municipal purposes. I think that although it can be used for agricultural right now, I think it should stay as municipal purposes, because you never know when you're going to need a place for batteries, hydrogen, electricity, what people are going to need 30 years from now, you don't know. And if you put an agricultural restriction on that land, it cannot be used for something for a town's need. And the other parcels that you've been discussing in East Acton are coming forward with conservation restrictions. I think you should think really hard about whether you should allow that to happen when there's so little land left for future needs. And I think that people will be unhappy 35 years from now that you have taken up everything so they can't use the land that you could now put in for municipal use rather than for conservation restrictions or an agricultural preservation. That's all.
Thank you.
Chair Pettis from West Acton, and I'm going to speak in opposition to what Ann just said. I think it's a wonderful idea to preserve farmland, which we are running out of very quickly, and a town can ask the state legislature to take it out of the CR if that's such a need, if it's an actual need as opposed to a desire. I thought Ann had said something in one of the EDC meetings about looking for a place to put a sewer for Great Road, for businesses, and from what I understand, the businesses are limited by the water infrastructure coming in, not the water infrastructure going out, and so I urge that that you go forward with the CR for agricultural restriction for Morrison Farm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just going to reiterate what Tara said on that too. I think it should stay as agriculture. Just my opinion though. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, sorry.
Okay. Town manager update.
Pass, thanks.
Any updates or information from any of the select board members? Okay, we'll move on. New and special business. Item 3, discuss draft decisions for site plan special permit number 7/12/2022-487, 100 Discovery Way. David, would you like to lead off with this?
Sure. So there in front of us is the new draft decision, and sections 3.3.2 through 3.3.9 are the new conditions that we put on last time. I don't know if there are any questions on those. If there are no questions, we can move to the places that we have to make a decision.
Okay, questions from any members of the board? Jim?
when the chair thought the time was right, I wanted to make sure we had a shared understanding of the voting rules and the consequences of different kinds of votes that we could make, whenever you think that would fit.
Thank you. Well, why don't we do that right now? Either if Kristen Kuchar, the town planner, is available, or I see that we have counsel here. Jim?
I had a Friday meeting with council. I'd be happy to take a first crack at it and then get it filled in by town council for the mistakes.
Go for it.
Okay, thanks. So with a site permit like this one, we have one chance for a vote. That vote could have one of a few outcomes. It could be 4 or 5 votes in favor of an approval. Then it's an approval. It has all the conditions that we agree on, that if we discuss them and agree on them. If it doesn't get that many votes, there's I suppose the other option is 4 or 5 votes for a denial, and then we all have agreed together on what the grounds for the denial are. But given what I've heard so far from board members, and I think we should get really clear about this before we take any votes, we're going to end up in a gray zone in the middle there. So I wanted to cover that. If we have fewer than 4 votes in favor, if we try a motion for an approval, it's a denial. The people that voted no on that, not the ones that abstained and not the ones that said yes, but the ones that actually said no, are the ones that would be required to come up with the reasons for the denial. So we basically create a small subgroup that writes the denial clauses in, and then those get sent off. If we do add, then I suppose there is also the case of we make no decision ever for the next 90 days. I don't see us doing that because we're kind of a responsible kind of board, but if we make no decision, then the applicant can apply for a constructive approval, which says that they didn't do anything, so by state law, this is an approval, and then they proceed. If we have a denial, or if we have an approval, and we end up those getting appealed, I'd like to cover those cases. If we have a denial, either because we've actually voted a denial or because we couldn't reach an approval, there could be an appeal. It would end up in the hands of a judge who has the choice to either just approve it as is, or send it back to us to add some conditions back in. Typically, they would give us some guidance about what conditions they would allow and what conditions they wouldn't allow. And then we would proceed from there. If we vote an acceptance and that gets appealed, the similar case applies. The judge, a judge, can then either just, accept the denial, or accept the approval, or send it back to us with some direction about what we need to do. Like if we've, added, let's see, if the grounds for the denial, if they accept some and not others, they could have us change those. So there's a lot of different cases ahead, but I think the thing I wanted to emphasize is that we need to be clear with each other about where we're headed in our votes, so that when we do get to that voting stage, we know we have a pretty good sense of where we're going, because votes, in this case, a vote has a fairly instant consequence.
Thank you. Comments from council?
No, just very briefly, that was an accurate summary of kind of the various permutations of your decision here.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I think I understand all those, and that's fine. The only thing that I thought was odd is that, you're saying if we overall voted to deny, then the ones who voted no would get to specify the reasons and not the whole board. Why is that?
If we vote to approve, but it doesn't reach the full quantum necessary, then it's the people that voted no that are required to construct the reasons for their saying no and put that into the denial decision.
And there's that text doesn't come back to the whole board. It's just edited by the people who voted no.
That's my understanding, but that'd be great council question.
Yeah, thank you. So the decision writing process would be the same regardless, so whatever process you would typically follow for publishing a decision after a vote, you would follow here. It's just that the folks whose votes control, so in that hypothetical, the no votes, would be the ones stating their findings that led to the no. So that's the only distinction. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's not, my question was actually, is it done separately by those people or in the open meeting, right? So if we vote no, and 3 people voted no, then do those 3 go off and write the decision, or do they draft a decision, it comes back to the whole board, or do we do it in a public meeting?
It would follow the same open meeting process. Nothing about that would render the next steps secret. It would all be required to be open.
Okay.
Yep.
So we could go off and draft it and come back, or either just do it in an open meeting.
Correct. And if you went off and drafted it and came back, and if it was circulated to the board members prior to your next meeting, you'd obviously need to post that online ahead of time. But
yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Oh, and, sorry. I think he's told me one other thing that I wanted to say out loud and make sure I got it right. If it is if it's a denial because we didn't reach a vote, does that, my understanding is that in a denial, all the conditions get removed. Is that right? Because it's not an approval, so there wouldn't be conditions.
Right. There would be no conditions associated with the denial. As you said, it's possible that if the denial were overturned by a court and it came back, you'd have some latitude to add some conditions in then. That's certainly not a guarantee. You might be limited in those conditions. But no, there's no conditions associated with the denial itself.
Thank you.
And so we're fast approaching Election Day, and we know that after the 1st of May, at least one member of the board that's been here for the hearings will not be around, and potentially 2. So with that in mind, if we delay this until after town meeting, after the election, and we have potentially new board members, how do we bring those folks up to speed? Do we have to start all over again? What's the process where we could have, say, 1 or possibly 2 members brand new?
So you'd have a problem there. If you had 4 members remaining who had participated in all of the earlier hearing sessions, then you could theoretically continue with those 4, and the approval would require a unanimous vote of those 4 at that point. Under some case law about this very issue, the new members, there's some exception for new members to be able to go back and watch videos and kind of catch themselves up. I do think that the extent of the hearing so far would probably tip over the scale there, and they probably wouldn't be able to just catch up by watching the videos. So it's likely that the process would have to start over, or you'd run into constructive approval issues, potentially.
Thank you. Okay. So I think at this point, we've got a couple of conditions that had been worked on to be added. David, do you wish to address those?
Sure, those are 3.3.2 through 3.3.9. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want me to read each one, or if you just want to ask for comments. The only one that I would like to bring up first, and just to make sure that people give it a thumbs up, as we talked about sidewalks last time, I had a conversation with the planning department and the size of this proposed facility. And again, usually what we do for these, they can either build a sidewalk on site, which you can see in 3.3.6, or donate the equivalent amount of money to the sidewalk fund, and that's what 3.3.6 says.
Okay, let's dispense with that one. On condition 3.3.6, could I have a show of hands or show of thumbs up if folks are agreeable to the proposed wording? Jim? Kate? Unanimous. Regarding the other conditions that David referred to, they're items that we discussed during our last meeting, and this draft has been available. Does anyone have any other suggestions, questions, issues with those other conditions? Jim?
I'm comfortable with the way these are written, especially, I mean, the first one about compliance with the health department's hazardous materials permit, we've already seen, and I think it just, I guess I want to emphasize that that in itself is a long and complex and important document. The other thing I wanted to point out is that I think David and staff have done a nice job of spelling out our intent in these, like for 332, you're listing all the things that the applicant shall provide, including, 4 handheld hydrogen fluoride gas detectors, calibration gas, regulator, adapter, battery charger, all this stuff. It's a nice complete list of all the stuff, and maintenance and recalibration each year. And providing all the 334, providing all the PPE to the fire department, I think is really key. And I think I also appreciate the way that we were saying, some of us were saying 5 minutes, and some of us were saying 10 minutes about the time that the operator of the facility would need to respond to an adverse event, and I appreciate that you've put 5 minutes there. I think that's, I think every minute counts in these kind of situations. Yeah, I think everything else we've either seen before, or it's very clear that, how it's written. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do members of the Select Board have any other questions about the document in front of you? David?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chair. There are 2 other sections, but they have to do, I'm not, they are 2.1.7 and 2.2.0, sorry, 2.20. And I don't know whether we want to do our major vote first and then decide on these, or decide on these and then do the major vote. Because, but what Jim was saying a few minutes ago, if we deny this, then it's the ones who vote no who would have to, basically fill in those 2 sections and confirm the other sections that we did earlier.
Jim?
In thinking about this and preparing for today, I had some other conditions to, in case the board was interested in entertaining additional conditions.
Let's hear what you have to say.
Okay. The first actually was just an edit. We have a finding in 2.12 that says there's adequate parking, but we've added a condition to require an extra parking spot or a marked parking spot. So that seemed like we might need to rewrite that finding. Although, well, maybe not, because we're just saying there's adequate parking within the existing parking lot. And just requiring one spot to be labeled doesn't add another one. So never mind that one. Although I did note that the condition that we wrote, 3.2.1, I think, it said, it says 4_2 parking spaces adjacent to the facility. In our testimony, there was information from the applicant that said they would not need more than one parking space. So it's possible that that should just say one parking space and be singular.
So we left it at 2 because in case the space was taken for some reason, people could still get in, and also allowed for emergency access if the operator was there and then an emergency vehicle needed to pull up. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. Just want to make sure that was done. The other thing I was wondering about was we do have a barrier in the back. 6 foot tall, is that 6 or 8 mostly for sound? And I wondered about a condition that required that wall be fire rated. Like a 2-hour firewall, which would slow down any potential spread of flames from the facility in the direction of the trees and the neighborhood.
Well, I believe that at least part of the wall is going to be below grade. It's actually going to be a retaining wall. And my assumption there was that the entire wall, due to the fact that you're trying to attenuate sound, would be something quite solid like cement block, stone, masonry construction. I don't have any objection if you want to specify that in a condition.
That there be a wall in the back that is fire rated. Yeah, that would be, if that would fit for other people, it seems like it would add an extra level of protection.
Yeah, I would have no problem with that. Do you have any other items?
Yeah. There was a conversation, there was an email exchange we got sent back and forth, and I couldn't quite sort out how it ended up. But the heart of it was, this between the fire department and the planning department, was a quote from NFPA, which must be some National Fire Code. Thank you. National Fire Protection Association. There's a section there, 4.16.2, fire mitigation personnel. And there's 3 clauses there that I wasn't sure if they were already reflected in our conditions or the Board of Health conditions. But they seemed important. One is that, the authority that, grants this permit. But I think that's what AHJ means. Remember what that weird little 3-letter abbreviation is? AHJ? It's like authority. Well, anyway, it says, when in the opinion of the AHJ, it's essential for public safety that trained personnel be on site to respond to possible ignition or reignition of damaged ESS. The owner, agent, or lessee, 1 or more fire mitigation personnel as required and approved at their expense. maybe this is if this could be a council question or a planning question, to understand what AHJ is, whether that's us or not.
John, do you have any input on that?
Planning Director Kristen Guichard is in the virtual audience. Do you know what AHJ stands for?
Or David.
Good evening, board members. I do not, but on a quick Google search, it looks like it has something to do with electrical safety, but I am not familiar. I just understand that that's something listed here on the National Fire Protection Association.
David?
Yeah, I found it under fire protection. It's the authority having jurisdiction.
Authority having jurisdiction, okay.
Doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
No, okay. So this basically gives somebody, which might be us, the right to, have a representative on site. So that might be covered by what we have already. The second clause is that personnel remains on duty continuously after the fire department leaves the premises until the damaged ESS is removed from the premises or the AHJ, whoever they are, indicates they can leave. And finally, there's a list of responsibilities for those on-duty fire mitigation personnel that have to be provided by the BESS owner, agent, or lessee, which is, common sense things like watch out, make sure it doesn't catch on fire again and contact the fire department if it's needed. And so this was this language that was right there in that letter that seemed like it belonged in our conditions, but I didn't know if it was covered, if the Board of Health conditions already referred to an FPA 855.
Well, David?
I remember that email exchanging clause, and I think it's fine to add it. If it's redundant with the Board of Health, it doesn't hurt.
Thank you.
So can we just say that we adhere to NFPA 855?
Yeah, and specifically 4.16.2, fire mitigation personnel. And the last idea that I heard from more than one person is some kind of protection from trees and tree branches. Because we did hear about the unpredictable ways large trees could, rearrange the structure of the energy storage facility. And so there were ideas about an overhead cage or something that would knock branches away. And I didn't know if that was something that would be, that the board was interested in or that would be practical.
I saw the same comment. To add something like that without us having knowledge of the engineering behind it, the practicality of it, I think the only way that I'd be in favor of considering that is if you plan on reopening the hearing and bring the applicant back in. Obviously, anything that they're going to build like that is going to have to be engineered. And so I don't think that's something that I could be in favor of just adding willy-nilly at this point. David?
So all these units are metal themselves, and inside are the modules, which are encased in metal. And the trees are now some distance away. And the applicant said that they would have a tree monitoring program, to make sure that there weren't trees in danger of falling on the facility. Those things to me sound sufficient. Just my 2 cents.
Okay. Imogen.
Yes, thank you. I know that we talked about replanting trees that are cut down in the process. Is that something that we outline in this document? I know that there was, I think, a verbal understanding of that, if I recall correctly, but I don't know if this is something that we want to add into this document or if this is the right place to add in that type of language.
Well, I'd want to refamiliarize myself with it, but I think there is a proposal here with, for some landscape buffer plantings. I believe that's in the document. I'd want to leaf through that to find the exact section. Jim?
It is shown on a sheet in the plan, the rough locations of plantings. It forms like a two and a half layer array around in the back to create a visual buffer.
David?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't think there's a problem making a condition of that, a condition that there be screening trees or 2 layers of screening trees planted behind the facility or between the facility and the woods, or however members would like to have it phrased.
Yeah, I wonder if there is if there's a plan that shows that already, if we just make sure that it's been cited in the decision.
The plans do show it, but we could still condition it in case the plan changes in some way.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like that.
So do we want to say something like a double layer of screening trees between the facility and the woods or behind the facility, which...
Yeah, more maybe at least a double layer.
Okay.
And I think it already says this in the plan as well, but to saying it out loud in the conditions might be wise too, which is that the mix of trees needs to be approved by the town arborist, so that we're getting appropriate trees that are going to last.
I think we know who he is under either title. Go ahead, Fran.
Just have a quick question, and I don't know, David, if you can answer. As far as the wastewater basin, do you remember what that looks like? What part of that on the site plan? I wish I had I'm trying to find the site plans.
There is a low wall designed to retain water in the case of a firefighting incident. And so it wouldn't retain an infinite quantity of water, but it would contain some amount of water. I mean, I don't know the exact amount.
John?
If the planning director has her hand raised, I think it's to ask a question or to clarify the deliberation that's ongoing right now.
Hi there, thank you. So I just had a thought it might be helpful to pull up the plan showing the vegetation. That way we could be a little bit more specific in the number of trees that the board may want to add. That way when we're going to approve a final plan set, because there are plan modifications that would need to be done, we can confirm that they've added those trees to the plan, and then we can later confirm that the number that the board is expecting are there. That way it's a little bit more clear. Is it all right if I do a screen share?
Please do.
So the plan is showing these kind of dark circles as proposed vegetative screening areas. On the plan, they say the location and species of plantings to be reviewed and finalized on site with the town planner following access road construction. So right now, they're kind of showing these here on the plan as proposed locations. What you could consider doing is conditioning that specific number of trees be planted, and you could say that you want, you don't want deciduous trees. You could be specific that you want like coniferous trees of some sort. And if you wanted more than that, you could do that as well. And we could then put that in the decision as a plan modification. And then they would show that on a plan before it was endorsed for construction.
Okay, thank you. Could you leave the plan up right now? I think we got clarification regarding the retaining wall sound barrier. It's clearly shown in the plan as a modular block retaining wall. So I think that should satisfy your concern about flame retardants. I think we've got, roughly 20 trees on there. I think we could specify that, minimum of 30 trees, evergreens, minimum 2 rows staggered, minimum height, time of planting, right, 6 or 8 foot, I think would be more than adequate to screen it, just as a starting point anyway.
Is this reference on the plan to access road construction? Is that left over from the old plan? Because we're not doing an access road. I don't remember approving any access road.
Yes, I think that's left over from the previous plan. That note has, I think, just got brought over. But I think what maybe we could do is in the decision, if the board's inclined, they could also include a plan modification to update that memo in its, that note in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
And so that part could be removed as well.
Thank you.
All right. So, David, I think we've got a couple of additional conditions that we'd like to add on to this. Do you have them noted, and can you review through those?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the first one is that it's not really the facility, so I'll say the plan adheres to NFPA 855 4.16.2 for fire protection, fire mitigation personnel. One second. Okay, and the other one says at least 30 conifer screening trees, at least 6 feet tall, must be planted between the facility and the neighborhood.
Okay, and just to do belt and suspenders on this, probably cite also that the sound barrier wall should be fireproof, fire resistant.
Okay, so the modular block sound wall behind the facility must be fire rated.
Yep. Does that capture everything? Okay. Questions, comments from other members of the board? All right. I guess at this point, I'd be looking for a motion. Someone care to offer it? David?
I move to approve the plan as presented for 100 Discovery Way with the conditions listed in the draft decision, plus the 3 decisions read in this meeting. The 3 conditions read in this meeting.
Okay, could I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Other discussion? Jim?
I think it would do us well to, before we take a formal vote, just to make sure we've heard from all the members about how they're, feeling about the process and about the potential vote, so we know where we're headed, in case we need to make adjustments.
Okay, once again, comments from any members of the board? David?
So I would say that the process was at least thorough. We spent, listened to lots of people, both in person and in email, over a number of meetings. We added a number of conditions in addition to the Board of Health's conditions. So it was a long process, but probably a worthwhile process.
Thank you. I'll reiterate David's comments. It's been a painstaking process with lots of input from the public. I know people are very concerned and very emotional about this. And there's been lots of back and forth between Board of Health, Health Department, Fire Department, the applicant, and really all branches of the town. So I don't think that there's any stone that's been left unturned in the process. It's decision time. Imogen.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that it has been a very thorough process for good reason. I think that this is a new technology, and I think with that comes a lot of unknowns. Us as a board, we're actively learning through this process. The residents here, we're actively learning through the process. The applicants here, we're learning through the process. I think that with this technology comes a lot of risk and unknowns, and I think that hopefully with the conditions that we've put forth, it sets up a precedent for this type of ongoing monitoring and evaluation that we're going to need to try to fill in those gaps of the unknowns to make sure that we're not just waiting for a worst case scenario to happen, but we're actively making sure that our residents are protected. And I think it sets an important precedent moving forward of other storage facilities that might come our way if we ever have to make such decisions in any type of future. It sets an important precedent for that type of working with the Board of Health to make sure that our residents feel like their concerns are being addressed. But really want to thank all the residents here today for continuing to show up and advocate for yourselves and others. And, hopefully this provides steps forward. It's not all the answers, but hopefully it's some answers that will continue to fill as we go on. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Other comments? David?
So I'm, again, a little, given Jim's comments in the beginning, wondering a little about the order here. So there's only, as far as I know, only 2 places left in the document where we need to fix wording. I don't know if it's correct to fix the wording after we approve it, or whether we should just make those edits here before the vote. The 2 are 2.17 and 2.20. Both of them, I think, could contain the words that the Select Board feels that the Board of Health has covered this, or this was covered in the Board of Health permit, or Board of Health approval. So I don't know if there are any comments from board members, either as to order maybe, I don't know if we need to ask council about the order. And then and what it should say there.
Well, I think that where you've moved to approve, I think that we should take the wording in these two sections that recognize and accept the Board of Health conditions. And I think that we should phrase this at this point as being an approval until we get a vote.
And so we're okay with both of these being worded as well, like in 2.17, the plan protects the neighborhood and the town against detrimental or offensive uses, et cetera, based on the Board of Health permit, and the plan adequately has adequate methods of disposal, et cetera, based on the Board of Health permit?
Yes. Jim?
I'm a little unclear about what the ellipsis at the end there. It says, "The Select Board finds the Board of Health conditions in its hazardous materials permit and the conditions herein provide, sufficient protection against adverse effects on the natural environment?" Or, I wasn't sure what the intent was, how that sentence gets filled out.
It was kind of, I think, just suggesting wording that we might put in there, but we could put in anything that we feel is appropriate.
Okay. Well, then I would suggest something like sufficient protection for the neighborhood, the town, and the natural environment.
And 2.2.0, based on the Board of Health permit?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, they did have an analysis there that talked about the, that there's not going to be waste taken out of there during the normal operation of the site, and they're very specific about construction disposal as well.
Okay, Mr. Chair, those are the only two remaining things.
John?
Just to note that the planning director has her hand raised again.
Okay, Kristen?
Hi there, thank you. I just wanted to get a bit more clarification on the fire rating. So something can be fire rated, but it would be good to know at what level. So is there a certain time? Typically, fire ratings are based on, an hour, like an incremental measurement of time.
I believe we were talking earlier as a 2-hour rating.
2 hour, okay, thank you. That was all.
Thank you. Okay. Any other points or issues that members of the board wish to raise? Jim?
I just had to look the audience in the crowd, because I know you guys have been working very hard on this one and hoping to get to a denial. So I felt like I needed to be direct about that. A couple things. One is that this is I think, the course that gets us the best level of protection and doesn't risk a judge stripping out all the conditions. That we were hamstrung from the beginning by having this facility called a warehouse. It's an unfortunate legal atmosphere a set of legal facts that we're working with. It's different than what happened in Weymouth. where they had more say over, what they could do. And finally, I just wanted to note that I did schedule my routine colonoscopy recently, and I am going to be right there at the, right there on Discovery Way. So my confidence in the safety of this facility goes to my willingness to be put underneath anesthesia and be a couple hundred yards away from this thing. Thanks.
Okay. So I will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the site plan as modified, site plan decision as modified, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So just to be clear for the record, let's have a show of hands. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like it's a approval. 4 votes yes, 1 vote no. All right, thank you. Move on to the next item on our agenda. Presentation by Sustainability Director and Finance Solutions Analyst on net metering credit reallocation and landfill solar production payments towards the Energy Efficiency Fund.
Okay, as they're getting set up, Andrea Becerra, Ellie Anderson are the team that are going to be presenting this information, and we look forward to your comments and questions.
Okay, good evening, Select Board and members of the public. My name is Ellie Anderson, and I am the Finance Solutions Analyst, and I've been with the town for around 9 months now.
Good evening, I'm Andrea Becerra. I'm the Sustainability Director, and I've been with the town for just over 2 years. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Acton's solar, giving you an update on our net metering, an update on a recent electricity contract we signed, and we're here to make a request for the Energy Efficiency Fund. So as you might know, we have 3 solar projects in town. We have the solar at the landfill, the solar rooftop at the North Acton Fire Station, and then the rooftop unit at the Highway Department. Together, these 3 provide us with net metering credits. So net metering credits are essentially a surplus of solar production that is sold back to the grid and then is returned to us as on-bill credits that we can use towards our electricity expenses. By far, the largest net metering asset we own is the 1.59 megawatt solar asset located at 14 Forest Road. The reason why we're here today is because last summer, in alignment with our sustainability goals, we've been looking for solar projects to add to the town, including the public safety facility, Narrow Park, the recreation center, the wastewater treatment facility, among others. But before we could do that, we quickly realized that we needed to check the balance of our net metering credits to make sure that we didn't have too much of a good thing, because there is such thing as having too many net metering credits, even though that sounds like a great problem to have. So we hired a consultant, and then Ellie came in as well, and she worked very closely with the consultant, and I'll let Ellie give a deep dive into what she found and then the solution that she proposes for the town.
So as Andrea said, the solar asset that's located at the landfill is a net metering facility, meaning that those panels generate electricity, they capture electricity, and that electricity travels through a meter and is ultimately purchased by Eversource. Traditionally, we receive monetary credit for that electricity in the form of on-bill statement credits. Those statement credits are allocated amongst all of our electricity accounts through a form known as the Schedule Z. And that's a form that we submit to Eversource telling them how we want these credits allocated across our accounts. We can submit that form up to twice a year. Ultimately, we found that the system has proved to be kind of unwieldy because of the volume of accounts that we have, the natural fluctuations in solar production through the year, throughout the day, and the fluctuations in our own electricity usage. Additionally, when you're putting together the Schedule Z, you're looking at the past to kind of guesstimate where those credits should be applied in the future. So this sort of system has led to an accumulation or a bank of solar credits with Eversource that aren't being used or fully utilized to our best benefit. So in working with the solar consultant, we were able to come up with two solutions. The first one was that we redistribute our credits amongst all of our accounts so that we're using them in the best way possible, getting the most bang for our buck. And the second was that we're exhausting all of those credits by roughly the same end point so that we can plan moving forward for what our electricity costs will be. The second solution that we came to was that we issue a request to Eversource to have our compensation type changed from on-bill credits to receiving monthly checks. So instead of every month them looking at our Schedule Z form and distributing our credits, they'll cut us a check for the solar production from that month. And then we're able to use that, and we're awarded flexibility where we're able to look at our usage, take that check, and determine the best way to use that towards our electricity costs. And the reason why the flexibility is so important is because we have 46 municipal electricity accounts, and the electricity charges for all of those facilities are made up of a number of charges: supply and demand from Eversource, as well as a power purchase agreement through Palo Verde, who owns the solar panels.
So another challenge we faced was the high cost of electricity costs. So some of you might remember that in 2021, most of our municipal accounts enrolled into the Acton Power Choice Green program. So that's the 100% renewable energy option that's available to residents and businesses. And so we enrolled all of our municipal accounts except for the town hall, public safety facility, and Memorial Library, which were in a different contract, which actually expires this June and will also be enrolled in Acton Power Choice. I'm sorry, in the 100% renewable energy option that I'll talk about shortly. And then, unfortunately, last year we experienced a spike in electricity costs. So we went from paying 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour to 20 cents, almost 21 cents per kilowatt hour. So that was a 40% increase in our electricity costs. Luckily, we were able to take advantage of a dip in the market, and we signed a. Sorry, there was a bug buzzing. Did you all hear that? Is it on me? Oh, okay. Sorry, there it is. Ah!
Oh, geez.
It's a stink bug or something. Don't kill it. Oh no, it's not a stink bug. It's something else. All right. Oh, thank you.
To the rescue.
Look at. Thank you. All righty. I lost my train of thought. Okay.
Dip in the market.
There was a dip in the market, and we signed a new contract for nearly 16 cents per kilowatt hour. So instead of that 40% increase, we saw a 20% increase or a 20% decrease from what we were paying. So even though we are paying much less, we still have experienced a slight increase in our electricity costs. And just to note that we are still on 100% renewable energy mass class 1 RECs, which is renewable energy that's, it's an electricity contract that supports renewable energy in the Northeast.
So that brings us to our request regarding the Energy Efficiency Fund. The first is that you approve that these checks be deposited into the Energy Efficiency Fund. And the second is that those funds continue to be used to offset our municipal electricity costs and to further invest in clean energy. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. As the person that was in charge of writing out the Schedule Z when we first established the solar project, I can feel your pain. It was really, really ugly, and it was, lots of gray hairs result from dealing with 46 energy accounts and Schedule Z and trying to predict these things. So I certainly understand where you're coming from. The important thing for me is to make sure that we understand that we continue to basically subsidize all the town public buildings electric bills through the equivalent of the net metering credits. And I guess the second question, really getting into the weeds here, is what is the legal mechanism by which you can accept a check and then turn around and pay bills with it? Is there a revolving fund that has to be established, or how does the mechanics of that work from an accounting point of view?
So the Energy Efficiency Fund is something that town meeting approved, and it went. We have a special home rule petition that enables us to do just that, accept these checks and then use them for energy efficiency or electricity projects. So it's not, you can't do it without the special legislation that you all had the foresight to put together 10 years ago, or whenever that was ago.
So there'll be no legal impediment to being able to do this, and we don't have to reappropriate the money at a subsequent town meeting. It just goes in and goes out again.
Yeah, correct.
Sufficiently broad.
We've been working with council on this, and we'll continue to, but the Energy Efficiency Fund is a unique opportunity for us to do just that, yes.
And kind of related to that, I know in the past, and this was sort of the intent behind part of the Energy Efficiency Fund, was to be able to finance capital projects and energy efficiency upgrades of town buildings. We'll still be able to do that in addition to leveraging our utility bills.
I think that's the benefit of getting the utility to actually cut us checks, because we do have this flexibility to, assuming we pay off all the electricity bills and there's anything left over, that can be used to invest in solar or other things that we're trying to do to lower our energy costs. So yes, it can be used for capital projects as well.
Okay, and let's say, speaking from my experience, this is an excellent idea, and it's too bad that it took 10 years before we figured out how to do it. Questions from other members of the board? David.
So I think this is an excellent idea, especially, and you guys kind of alluded to this, if we have more solar projects generating more cash, this goes into a place where we can use the money for energy efficiency project. My question is, what is the buy rate, for if we're talking about a credit for 1 kilowatt hour, what does Eversource pay us for 1 kilowatt hour? Their normal default electricity rate, the rate that we have, or because their wholesale electricity rates from 11 cents a kilowatt hour to 22 cents a kilowatt hour or more. So anyway.
It's my understanding that it fluctuates based off of what Eversource's going rate is at that time. It's not the same as the rate that we're buying electricity at. And I don't remember the exact number, but I believe on the last statement it was around 20 cents a kilowatt hour.
But it does go up as electricity prices rise as well. So
Right.
you do see that balance.
If it's their default rate, actually, many times the Acton Power Choice standard rates are below that, so we actually make a little money anyway. So I know we go Acton Power Choice Green, which is usually a little above that, but still, that's a good deal as well, I think.
Were you going to clarify? Oh, no, about the solar?
So we should clarify that you mentioned that we can get cash for our solar. It really is for this particular landfill project because it's so large. It falls under a certain category that can receive checks. So our rooftop solar cannot receive checks, for example. We still receive metering credits from it, but our net metering credits from the landfill were made up the bulk of our net metering credits. So you can see that the checks really make up a big portion of what we were using for most of our bill credits.
So you mentioned at the beginning of this presentation several other possible projects that we might do in town. Would those be regular net metering then? Or if
Yes.
if they're big enough? For example, if we did the wastewater facility and that's of a sufficient size, then it could also be cash maybe. But if we did a parking lot somewhere which is too small, we would just get regular kilowatt hour for kilowatt hour credits.
Yeah, so it depends on like Andrea said, the classification of the facility. The landfill asset is a class 3 solar facility, which is what enabled us to ask Eversource to change the compensation method. So it really depends on what those future projects would be classed on. And I believe it's on the generation capacity of that solar field. It also depends on if we were to pursue future net metering solar projects, which are these on-bill projects, or it could be behind the meter where the electricity that it's generating is being netted out of what it's pulling from the grid. So it really depends.
So we might not be completely out of Schedule Z annoyances, but if we have small projects, we do that, which still leaves us then the landfill cash to spend on electrifying buildings and that kind of thing. Great, thank you very much.
Jim?
Thanks. I think this is a great idea. I did have some questions. So in the past, it seems like when we look at our budget for electricity, it has been net of those Schedule Z payments. So we haven't seen in the past a sort of a lowered electricity bill, lower than our actual electricity use, because, who except for you is going to go and, back out all of those Schedule Z payments to figure out what we're actually paying for electricity. So so it seems like there's a possibility that when we look at next year's budget or a budget after this happens, electricity is going to show up as a higher cost, and then there's also going to be some offsetting income from the efficiency fund. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what to expect in budgets with respect to electricity costs.
So part of the purpose of the work that our team here has been doing is to try to increase our ability to bring on more solar projects, which would have the effect of not needing to have the budget so high. So what they've done, or what we're proposing here, is giving us the ability to keep the same budget situation if we're able to add more solar projects, which we were running up against a cap and weren't able to do that now. So we've increased our appetite for solar, which should in turn allow us to maintain the way we've been budgeting electricity, more or less, going forward.
Okay. So let me see if I can say that back and see if I get it. So will there still be an, how will that money that's transferred from the Energy Efficiency Fund to reduce the electric bill show up in the budget? Is that a separate transfer? Will the electricity budget that's reported be the original electricity bill, or the electricity bill minus these payments from the Energy Efficiency Fund?
I think I followed that question. I think Ellie followed it better.
So you're right. Historically, the way the budget's been done, it's kind of a double net budget. So we have our Eversource bills, and then we have what we pay in the PPA agreement, and then we subtract out our on-bill credits, or what we're expecting to get in on-bill credits. So I would assume the budget would probably be handled in a similar way, only this time, instead of having on-bill credits, we're receiving this solar funds in a different form.
Okay, that's great. So if for some reason, like we were up redoing our, carbon footprint, and we wanted to know the actual amount of electricity we were using, we can still get that right from Eversource, right? So, but for
Yeah.
budget purposes, we're talking about maintaining a relatively low electricity budget. because
Yeah, so
we'd
we've
be paying
been-
for that.
Yeah, budgeting on what the actual spending is, but you're
Okay.
right, that's not the actual cost of the electricity that we're taking in from Eversource, because we're able to reduce it and mitigate it because we have the solar field.
Okay. And the last comment was, as you're thinking about solar projects, I'd encourage you to look at this piece of municipal land that's behind Conant School. It used to be, it's an abandoned ball field. So it gets mowed once a year, so it doesn't have trees built up. It was abandoned because it gets a little soggy for some parts of the year, which makes it not very practical for a ball field. But it's a nice, cleared acre and a half of land that, could be a nice ground-mounted solar system. My last thought, thanks.
Thank you. Questions, comments from other members of the board? Questions or comments from members of the public? Okay. John, would you like a vote on this, or is this an update?
We would appreciate if the board considered voting a motion, I think, similar to what's on the screen in green there, or whatever we call it.
David?
I move to approve the deposit of monthly net metering credit checks into the Energy Efficiency Fund. Well, I thought it was two motions, so that's the first motion.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? David?
I move to approve the use of those funds to invest in clean energy and mitigate electricity costs across all municipal operations.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion from the board? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Thank you very much. And congratulate you and the town manager on coming up with this solution to a really nasty accounting problem we're dealing with on a monthly basis.
Great job.
Thank you.
Nice work.
Okay. Item 5, discuss West Acton Citizens Library. John, would you like to lead off? And then I've got some comments, and I'm sure Imogen probably wants to
Yeah.
update it as well.
Yes, thank you. I've been communicating with the chair and our liaison and other members of the board over the last few weeks since the appointment of temporary trustees to the West Acton Citizens Library Trustee Board. There's been some challenges getting up and running in terms of meetings and interactions with staff, and I was just looking for the board to provide some support. We have a very high-functioning library operations with great staff that work out of the building next door, but are providing services to the community, including in West Acton. And I just want to make sure that how we're moving forward is in a way that allows them to keep doing what we've asked them to do, which is increase services to the community, provide engaging and welcoming environment at both libraries, and improve the way we provide services. And I just want to make sure that that's what we're focused on here, because it's been challenging lately to focus on those things as it relates to some of the governance issues that are currently being discussed in West Acton and otherwise.
Thank you. Imogen?
Yeah, so as the select board liaison for the libraries, I will say that, we now have a full board of trustees, which is a good thing. I think that there's a lot of fundamental disagreement with the upcoming town meeting article warrant, and that's something that we've been trying to work through. I think that there's a lot of talk about compromise. I don't know if there will be a compromise that satisfies everybody. I think that we're really here to look to the board for support. I think for me, the biggest thing is we can have a difference of opinion, but there has to be a basis of respect for all parties involved. And so I think that I know for a fact that staff have felt unsupported, and so I think that that's important to note, and I think that the trustees have also mentioned that they feel unsupported. I think that I'm also going in spirals because it's been a very conflicting past couple of weeks that have given me so many nightmares, but I think that the most important thing is, we need to be respecting these differences, but I think that another big thing that I think we've made some progress on since this was last brought up is the importance of accessibility. The Citizens Library is non-ADA compliant, which means that any meetings held there aren't accessible by nature. What we normally do with programming is we'll have programming at AML mirrored to what's happening at the Citizens Library, or we'll try to have some virtual component at Citizens to make sure it's accessible. So I think that we're making steps towards, we have we do have a meeting on Thursday that is going to be taking place in Town Hall, which is accessible. But I think that if we could also get support from the board for not even just in this case, but in all cases, just a show of support for having more accessible meetings for all our town boards and committees moving forward would be really great. Because that's one thing is we can disagree on opinions, but at the end of the day, the structures of our meetings do need to maintain OML, open meeting law. They need to be accessible from a human rights standpoint, from even what the state is moving towards in that way. And so that's something that I think having board support here would be really helpful with. And then I'll stop my monologue.
Thank you. So a lot of the points that I'll raise, I actually raised at the most recent West Acton Citizens Library temporary trustees meeting, so there'll be no surprises here. And then I'll go on to a little bit of discussion about the proposed bylaw that the temporary trustees have come up with. I'll once again reiterate the fact that I did serve for 2 years as a trustee of the West Acton Library, and I remain committed to the idea of having some sort of library presence in West Acton. Exactly how that's going to be done in both an accessible and a financially prudent manner is something that's going to take quite a bit of discussion. Specifically, there have been at least 2 meetings of the temporary trustees that certainly violated the Mass Open Meeting Law and the Americans with Disabilities Act by having the meetings in a building that was not accessible. And the first meeting that I attempted to attend virtually, the Zoom connection and audio was so bad that it was effectively useless. This was flagged as an issue in advance by the town manager that this would not work. They chose to hold the meeting anyway. The most recent meeting last Thursday was held in person only, and this was after I had specifically reached out to the chair of the temporary trustees and informed her of these concerns that I had. So I think that's a step forward to have the next meeting here in Town Hall, which is accessible and does have a proper Zoom connection. Moving on to a couple of the issues that I see with their proposed bylaw, they keep referring to themselves as an association. And from reading the documents from 1962, it appears the association, quote unquote, was eliminated in 1962 when this became a town function, a town department, recognized as a branch of the Acton Memorial Library. It is not a private club that's to be funded by taxpayer dollars, and the proposed bylaw from the trustees seems to imply that it should be, and should be run that way. The temporary trustees have proposed to hire a special counsel to engage in legal fisticuffs with town council. And I would refer you to the town charter, which reserves to the select board the sole right to hire counsel. It's one of the few hires that the select board actually can do. The temporary bylaw, the bylaw provided by the temporary trustees envisions hiring and supervision of employees and direct control over supplies and equipment. Both of those certainly are in violation of the town charter, which reserves all of those rights to the town manager. 1962, when this was passed, this was prior to the town manager form of government. Town charter has been changed at least twice since then, but it's made it very clear that all operations are under control of the town manager. There's been issues raised about allegedly equipment and supplies that were stolen from the West Acton Library, particularly bookshelves taken from a back room. Well, those particular bookshelves actually were surplus supplies left over from the 1966 addition to the Acton Memorial Library, which became surplus when the library was expanded in the late 1990s, and then at some point they stopped being used to support paper products and that sort of thing in the custodial area of the library, and were brought over to the West Acton Library. So it was certainly not any assets that had been achieved by the association or any successor to that. During the discussion the other night, there was a motion that was passed. I don't have the exact wording of it. Basically, the temporary trustees seemed to try to imply that they had control over 18 Windsor Ave, also known as the Windsor Building, and control over the contents of that building in addition to the physical building itself. And that's certainly, under any interpretation, that building is not an asset of the West Acton Citizens Library. It's a town building under the control of the town manager. Anything that needs to be done there would have to be done through the auspices of the town manager. I think the other issue that I have is that at one of the recent meetings, there was a list brought out of the duties of the trustees as they were traditionally performed. And, since 1962, or certainly prior to that, there's been lots of iterations about what the trustees might or might not do. But certainly, direct supervision and hiring and firing of a library director, a librarian, or any kind of staff was certainly never within their purview. Certainly, there were, at one time, there was a Citizens Library Auxiliary that raised some money through book sales and that sort of stuff. That organization went out of business. And I remember as a trustee actually assisting the library director at that time with doing some library book sales, but this tended to come and go. And frankly, the trustees, in my experience, were very dependent upon the good work of the professional staff that was provided, first with Jen Friedman and now with Kristen McLeod over there, who undoubtedly are employees of the town, report to the town manager, and do not report to a West Acton Citizens Library Association. So I think, there's a great deal of territory to cover here. I think there is some drastic points of contention here. One other item that I would like to bring up is there's been discussion about a 4/5 vote being required in order to make any changes over there. I spoke with our council, the only council town has, just this afternoon, and was reassured that the 4/5 quantum required in the 1962 decision dealt only with discontinuing the operation or sale of the building. And I don't think anybody is planning to discontinue the library operation over there. I've said repeatedly that I'm in favor of continuing a library operation over there. I don't think there's anything there that would have anything to do with, would impede any changes that need to be made as we move forward into the 21st century. So I will leave that there. Comments from any of my colleagues on the board. Jim.
I was looking back at the last decisions we made about the library, the West Acton Citizens Library, and our goal was to achieve a consensus, an agreement between the Citizens Library trustees and the Memorial Library trustees and the other, important parties like staff and the select board in understanding, how the library operates, what's the role of the trustees, and all the important questions. So here's my strong guess is that although I agree with some of the points you made and not others, I'm pretty sure that that this is not a good place to be building consensus. In fact, I think this meeting, public meetings like this, are good at staking out positions. They're good at, making distinctions even stronger and driving us away from the process of reaching an agreement. So, so I encourage us to set up a process where we get, for example, the chairs of the trustees, supported by staff and a select board member, to go off in a non-quorum set of as a non-quorum set of people to go talk these things through and find ways forward. I think that's positions, the positions of the various people that have been expressed are not compatible, but positions are not people. People are not positions. People can listen to each other and change their positions, and I think that takes time. So I just encourage us to take the time to, move this forward in a way that achieves our goal of finding a consensus. We could try to make a power move and say, this side's right, that side's wrong, let's go this way, piss some people off and move into a situation in which we are not cooperating. I'd like to not do that. So I'm in favor of, first of all, not trying to cram something together for this town meeting. And second of all, figuring out a quieter and more, a way that's going to encourage negotiation and listening, which I think is probably without microphones. Obviously anything that group comes up with has to be, discussed and approved at open meetings, but I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen first.
Imogen.
Yeah, so to answer that question, the town manager and I did meet with the chair of the Citizens Library trustees, and it was a brief meeting. I think that, it's definitely possible that we have more of them to try to work it out. But I will say that The other complication with citizens is that it is a 3-member board, and so any one member reaching out to any other member to discuss anything is in direct violation of open meeting law, which means that much of the discussion will have to happen in open meeting by default in order to get board consensus. So I think that that's something, by the nature of a small board, that we're trying to work through. I think that consensus building is important. I think that's something we're trying. I think that the fundamental issue here is we have some trustees that don't agree with the legal understanding that our town council has. And we're operating under what our town council has told us is the scope of the roles and responsibilities of our citizens trustees. And so that's essentially the fundamental difference, is that when we put together our draft of the article, it's not going to satisfy, and it hasn't satisfied the trustees' wants and needs for what they believe are their rights for making decisions on behalf of the library, because we're operating under 2 very different umbrellas. And so to Dean's point about the ability to hire counsel or not, I honestly, I don't know where that would go. In this case, I guess they don't have the band, or they don't have the right to hire counsel. But one thing that the town manager has mentioned is that he's going to present what Annette has written. Annette, who being our chair of the trustees, has drafted and shared with the other trustees as kind of what the traditional roles and responsibilities have been of the trustees, and see if our town council has anything to say to potentially add to our article. But I don't know. I think the meeting is on Tuesday, if I'm correct, with town council. But that's where we stand on that. We're pretty much at a standstill because there's this discrepancy with our town council.
Thank you. Other comments? Fran?
Does it make sense to expand the trustees, have it a larger member? Just so it's not so restrictive in there?
I think that because it is, I think it's pretty clear in the warrant article in 1962 that it's a 3-member board. I think that would have to require probably a town meeting vote, but yeah, I think that's, it's clearly defined that it's 3 trustees that serve their term.
John?
I just wanted to, and I have a draft bylaw that I've shared with the trustees, and then I've received feedback both during the meeting and after a meeting, and then there's been revisions, and as mentioned, I'll be going over this with council tomorrow to see if we have an updated version that we can share with you at your meeting next week and with the trustees in the meantime. But the concern that I have is what I started out with from the very beginning, is that the staff are getting frankly confused. The trustees apparently adopted bylaws last week with very specific things about how the library is to be operated. So staff is now at a point where they either have to follow those or listen to what I've said, is that the trustees don't have the authority to create bylaws that are binding on the entire community. So you don't have to. So it's a governance issue that I think needs to be addressed and can't wait for the future. I think it needs to be addressed now, because it's hard enough to do what we're trying to do, and to have this competing direction from the trustees from what we've been advising staff based on town council's opinion is not healthy for us to be able to operate the facilities.
Thank you. David?
So I support the Article 11 wording as approved by Town Council. The current situation at the Citizens Library is untenable. We must not put off clarifying the situation and trying to continue as is. We need to be clear that the responsibility of the citizens trustees is for the gifts fund. Some of the temporary citizens trustees operate in a way that is incompatible with their role, including direct micromanagement of staff, violating staff areas in the library without an appointment. In other words, they just walk behind the counter. They violate staff work areas like staff desks. They treat town property as if it's their personal property. This has created huge problems for staff and has consumed a huge portion of the town manager's time, including working with all of us independently at one time or another. No other board or committee in Acton operates this way, none. No select board members try to enter staff areas, without working with the town manager or making an appointment with staff. Finance committee members don't go looking through the finance department desks, right? Memorial Library trustees do not just walk into staff spaces, nor do they take or move materials in the library. Other board members do not try to micromanage town staff to the point that they cannot do their jobs. Some Citizens Library trustees say that they need local control of the Citizens Library, but they can't articulate why. They just want control. Some Citizens Library trustees want to control programs at the library, but they can't say how they would make the programs different in West Acton. Currently, our professionally managed library offers programs at Citizens that are also offered at the main library, and as Hima just said, they're offered in the main library so that people with disabilities are not disenfranchised. Some temporary citizens trustees want to operate the library in an informal way that it was when it was turned over to the town in 1962. One resident in particular is such a strong advocate of this that she has taken it upon herself to instruct the temporary trustees on what they need to do at their meetings. At a recent meeting, the temporary trustees voted to spend gift fund money on legal fees to challenge our town council. They can spend the gift fund money on what they want, but they cannot take legal action on part of the town. At a recent meeting, they adopted bylaws for how the town should manage the library to their liking. However, citizens trustees are not empowered to have bylaws, certainly not that are binding on the town. Citizens Library is a special and a different kind of library from the main library. It's a reading library with popular materials to check out, while the main library is a much broader selection of materials and facilities for research and the like. The actions taken by the temporary trustees are not in the interest of library patrons, whether they are in West Acton or other places in town. In the past few years, Citizens Library has been run much more professionally, which has pleased patrons in West Acton and throughout the town. Article 11 defines Citizens Library, the Citizens Trustees, as the administrators of the Citizens Library Gift Fund. That's currently not enshrined in our laws, so it's not defined anywhere. Some would like the Citizens Libraries to run the library as they see fit, returning the library closer to its state more than 60 years ago. Until a few years ago, Citizens had one part-time librarian. While she was good, she was one person. If she was sick or had a personal issue, the library was closed. As a member of the board, I personally received complaints about this. In recent years, Citizens Library has become much more professionally managed, resulting in longer hours and better services to residents. I'm in favor of the Article 11 text as approved by Town Council. I don't think any of the folks who want to delay or change it are representative of most of the town's residents.
Thank you. Other, Jim?
Just to make sure we're covering the various issues involved, I think you raised some really important legal points about open meeting law and accessibility. And, rather than going through the process of, having a complaint and having the Attorney General rule and all this, all the extra rigmarole that goes around with it, I think we should recognize that there was a problem and address it ourselves, find a way internally to address the issue. To me, the natural way to address the issue, now that the trustees have said they're going to start meeting in accessible spaces, is to revisit the decisions that they've made, a handful of decisions so far, to revisit those in an open session that's in an accessible space, and reaffirm them or not. it also gives us a chance to do a reset on, some of the conversations that led to those decisions. So that's what I would recommend we do. If the rest of the board thinks that's a good idea, we could, move towards a motion in that direction. The other thing, the other question that's come up is about counsel and the hiring of counsel. I gather they found a pro bono person to give them some advice, so there's not a question of spending money on a lawyer. To me, there's some value in this process in that, as I read the town council opinion, it says, look, there's a lot of ambiguity in this situation. Things have not been written down. We are in unclear territory right here, so let's clarify it by having a town meeting bylaw that clarifies it. So that says to me that it's not that everything's already clear cut. If everything was already clear cut, we wouldn't need to have a bylaw. We wouldn't need to go to town meeting to clarify. So there is some room for reasonable, interpretation of exactly what our current situation is. But the key point is, we need to reach an agreement so that we can move forward. If I was teaching a negotiating course, I would say, well, it's good to know what ground you're working from. If you're the trustees and you want to maximize the amount of say they have, I can see why they'd want to get some free advice about how much say they actually have in order to, approach the kind of quiet negotiations that need to happen with more information about what their legal status is. I mean, I don't really care what the legal status is. I care about getting to a place where we all agree on what it actually is and express that at a town meeting building. I don't see that happening in the next, couple of weeks. So I still recommend we take the time to have those conversations happen, and I think we'll find that these positions that seem radically different are going to start to converge during conversations. If there's little adjustments to the article that we can grant whatever powers to the trustees we all agree are reasonable. We don't, if it's a little bit beyond administering the gift fund, there's nothing illegal about that. As long as it doesn't interfere with clear things that, there's some bright red lines, obviously, that the town has. And I agree that things like, hiring people is not something that trustees do. Being involved in the interviews, sure, why not? That's what the Memorial Library trustees do. So I think there is room for conversation. There's room for settling this out. It just takes time, and I don't think we have time between now and the town meeting.
Imogen.
Yeah, so the tricky thing is, for me, I think the people who are really suffering are staff, because there's such ambiguity over who to listen to, who to follow, what the process is in all of this. And I think it's really staff that's struggling, and thus it's the programming that's struggling. And I think as a result, our residents are being affected. And I think that to me is the non-negotiable, right? At the end of the day, we're putting together our programming. We're doing all of this stuff so that we can serve the residents of this town. And so I think that, I think delaying the process, for me, the hesitation is, if we further delay this process, how much space of ambiguity are we going to be left in where staff aren't really sure who to go to and what that process is. And I think that's where I'm personally struggling with prolonging the process. I agree with, let's try to use the time that we have to try to reach consensus, but my hesitation is with elongating this further, and thus putting staff under more strain through an already very stressful process.
So I think, turning to Jim's point about the temporary trustees hiring counsel, there's two issues. One is paying for the counsel, which obviously that's not something appropriate, using taxpayer money to to hire an attorney in violation of the town charter. I think the other issue is, even if the attorney was planning on operating for free, it's the question of standing. If the 3 temporary trustees, as individual taxpayers, residents of the town, wish to engage an attorney as individuals, not as town officials, obviously that's not anything that we'd have any control over. It would be a legal matter. They'd be looking for legal advice, and they could, I think they could speculate any way they wanted. But I think it's a really bright line when you have a town board or committee, which the temporary trustees are, going out and securing the services of council, whether compensated or not. Now, that is a direct violation, in my opinion, of the town charter. And I think, lots of really strange things happened when Acton was a very small town prior to having, we had a 3-member board of selectmen, we had, an elected tree warden, an elected highway surveyor, all sorts of things. That was in the 50s and 60s and going back the 40s and the 30s, when Acton was a very small town, when, the legal status was different. There's been new legislation that's been passed over the years. Obviously, we've got a town manager form of government. When the town manager position first opened up in the late 1960s, there were many of these little sandbox fights. And gradually, each one of those was resolved. And this is sort of the last hanger-on of one of those. And I think it's time to get this thing resolved. I'll join David and Himinger with wanting to move ahead with getting this, the article that's been written by town council brought to town meeting for a vote. David.
How much input have the trustees of the Citizens Library had on,
Himinger?
Yes, so the town manager presented the draft to the trustees, and then there was an email exchange and then also a meeting with the chair of the citizens trustees, the town manager, and I to discuss the wording of that. The town manager mentioned that next steps include putting forth the draft as we have it to town council, and I believe sending it back to the trustees. They have it on their agenda to review for Thursday. So that's where we are currently with that.
Okay, I'm going to get emotional. It just, to me, it seems like, and it's uncomfortable, that there's a faction that's very angry and, we want to move forward. But I think we need to make everyone involved happy and comfortable in doing that. So that's where I'm coming from.
David.
So, Jim had said some things seemed unclear, but it was our town council said it was absolutely clear that there was no basis that the citizens trustees were public library trustees as per Massachusetts general law. It's also clear that when they hire counsel and do these other things, that they are costing the town money, legal money, in order for us to interpret what they say. Third is, they have been, as I tried to say here, they have been operating in a completely unreasonable fashion, in a way that no other board or committee in town operates, in terms of dealing with staff, dealing with town property. It's beyond the pale, right? And we're not, there is no compromise between someone who's gone off the deep end and unreasonable, right? we don't start with a point of being unreasonable and then come back to the middle that's only a little unreasonable, right? I completely agree with Hemija that staff is being driven nuts. And so we cannot delay this, and we cannot come up with a solution that has the citizens' trustees getting in the way of a professionally managed library. And I want to emphasize one more thing. When asked why, right, they say, well, West Acton needs local control, but they can't say why. But why are the people in West Acton different than the people in the rest of the town, right? I understand that it's a reading library. I understand the point of that library. I get all that. It's a gem, right? But it doesn't mean that it needs to, that only people in West Acton can understand.
Jim?
I get the staff stress thing, and it hits me. So I wonder if there's one way the board could support the staff is to say that until, we have an actual written agreement, that we ask the town manager to direct the staff to act as if the reporting relationships are exactly as written in the draft Article 11. So in other words, clarify that, the trustees are not hiring and firing them. The trustees are not, taking individual books out of the library without working with the professionals. All the sort of stuff that's already in there, and it should be clear. I'm very comfortable with the notion of supporting our staff by saying, until we work out the formalities, let's operate this way. It removes some of the ambiguity. If we then, end up with a bylaw that, has some subtleties shifted here and there, that's fine. But I think in the meantime, the reporting requirements, I agree, are causing a lot of stress. So I think, I'm fine with saying, with having the board direct the town manager to, to direct the staff that, hey, when you're working with the West Acton Citizens Library, here's how we want you to operate for now.
Okay, further comments from the board? Hemija?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I know that we're currently in the process of gathering more trustee feedback, and we're kind of in limbo with the edits. This might be carelessly optimistic, but I do think that there is a way for us to all work together in time for town meeting. I think that everyone, including the trustees, are exhausted with the situation. And so I think that there is potentially a way moving forward, and I think that operating and directing town staff to instruct staff that, the article as it's drafted is going to be is going to be the structure until we get to an official town meeting and we're actually able to vote on whatever this bylaw, as you said, with its shifts and changes, whatever they may be, is implemented. Then I think that would give staff more clarity on kind of how to navigate this. So yeah, I would support that.
Fran?
I'm sorry is there a possibility for a special town meeting in the fall? I'm dying to bring back the fall town meeting. Is that an option? Yeah. To give everyone more time to take a breath.
It's probably $10,000 to run a special town meeting. John?
I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't think asking us to adhere to a draft bylaw that isn't having effect is going to help us with this situation that we're faced with the current trustees that are there now, who refuse to work with pretty much any guidance or support or technical assistance we've tried to impart on what they're doing. We had been working with the trustees. Dot Curtis was the trustee for several years, who was a chair, who resigned earlier this year or maybe late last year. We had been working with her over the last 2 years on this transition. We worked with her over the summer to increase hours, and a lot of the work that we've been doing up to this point has been with trustees, just not the new 3 trustees that were appointed in the last few weeks, but it doesn't mean that we haven't been working with the trustees all along. We have. And it wasn't until the last month or so that there's been such strong objections to what we've been trying to do for the last 2 years. This bylaw and the clarity that it would give us wasn't as necessary 6 months ago as it is now, because now we really have an issue. Before, we thought we might have an issue. Now we really have an issue where there's trustees that are appointed by this body, soon to be appointed by town meeting, with authority that isn't in our town bylaws. And if we wait another year or even another 6 months, that's a long time. I can tell you the last 2 weeks have been a long time. I can't imagine doing it for another 6 months. So we're asking for your help. We have suggestions. We can work with council. We can work with the trustees. But I don't think waiting another 6 months is going to help us.
So taking a hint from Jim, I think it is important that in the transition between now and town meeting, or now and town meeting and when things finally get resolved, I think it's very important that it be clear, specifically as far as staff issues. So I would propose a motion that the board instruct the town manager that it's our expectation that all operations of the West Acton Citizens Library, as far as staffing, programming, purchasing, and all other issues, would be operated as if they were fully a branch of the Acton Memorial Library, and that any staff assigned to the West Acton Citizens Library would report directly to the Director of Libraries, specifically Maria Palacio in the Acton Memorial Library. And I think that would clarify some of the issues, hopefully, that in this time period, until we get some form of resolution. That the draft bylaw that has been prepared by council does not really envision any kind of hands-on control by the Citizens Library trustees. So we can't say, well, act like we have passed the law, because then we've still got this problem. So I think it's just important that we reiterate that our expectation is that all employees and all operations will be run in a manner reflected in the town charter and under the control of the town manager and his designee. You're looking for a second on that.
Can I have a clarification? I'm sorry, Dean.
Okay.
So you said Citizens Library has a town budget. It's part of the town budget.
Yes.
Is that a little umbrella under AML? Yeah.
Sorry. We don't need commentary from the audience, Mr. Manager.
So over the last few years, we've been looking at how costs are incurred at Citizens Library. There are some things like the subscription to the Minuteman Network, which have been added in the last few years, that are joint expenses with Memorial Library. It's one of the 25 program budgets that are approved in the recommended budget. It's currently its own budget, but it's managed by the staff of the Citizens Library, who is the staff of the Memorial Library. They do all the purchasing and work on it. So.
And that's separate from their gift fund.
The gift fund is totally different from the budget.
Yep.
And I just to put a tighter point on it, we operate as a bottom line budget. When we vote, when the select board votes, and then in town meeting votes, they vote one number for all town operations. Those town operations are overseen by the town manager. We don't need your commentary right now, thank you. The board is discussing. There will be time for public comment. David?
I'll second your motion. And also, just for my clarity, when, for the warrant, do we have to be done with this process of wording this article? I mean, I'm prepared to move the contents of the article today, but we're thinking about a meeting next week. Can we vote on final wording at that meeting and still make the printing? Or do we have to decide tonight?
So the warrant needs to be completed by Monday night. And we had been looking to have a meeting for next week. There's a conflict Monday night, so we were looking to have it, I believe, Wednesday, which would be too late. We were actually, yeah, so.
So I'm okay with your motion, Dean, but I would also like a motion that we use the draft wording from town council in the warrant.
Okay, let's dispose of the first one. So we've got a motion and a second to this board informs the town manager of how the library is going to be run, at least in the short term, under the control of the Acton Memorial Library. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I'll abstain. I would have preferred to have heard citizen comment before voting.
Okay, so we've passed that motion. David, to your second point.
Yes, you know, I would, you know, we were sent around, and I think it was included in a packet last time, the draft wording from council. I suggest we use that in the warrant. I completely agree here that we cannot miss this town meeting. If we want to come back after and amend that bylaw in a future town meeting next year to say that it's different, okay, we can do that. Or Mr. Chair, if you want to have a special meeting, you know, sometime Friday or something to approve just this one thing, we could do that. But I think it's essential that we get that wording into this year's town meeting.
Okay, thank you. We'll open this up to citizen comment. We're going to hold it to 3 minutes.
Tara from Acton again. This would be the first time that in history where a bylaw change was put on a printed warrant without public comment period, without hearings. The archaeological bylaw was, you know, months and months. In terms of money, the budget is 20% more than when the trustees were keeping the costs low. I appreciate a lot of the changes, and I really do. I urge the trustees to support staff by making some kind of statement in support, because I do not like anybody being unsure of their employment situation. However, I wish you would modify your statement to say that it's town staff that are staffed at Citizens Library, not AML staff. AML does not own staff. John owns staff in a sense, okay? We don't own people, but anyways, my point is that if it was town staff reporting to John and Maria, like, hey, I'd be totally cool with that. The problem that I've got is that Memorial Library has a special act for a building, the library, not other buildings, not other stuff. In terms of staff areas, there was a misunderstanding very early on where town staff changed the locks and decided that certain areas were off limits. Trustees walked in like they had for 20 years and went behind the counter a little bit, and then suddenly there's like a big thing. So let's be careful about what we hear from people. In terms of special town meeting, enough signatures gets a special town meeting. 4/5 vote. This is what the lawyer that's been so kind to pro bono help us understand some of these laws. There are library associations which are very different than public libraries, and so I'm pulling back on my position that they're public libraries. And we are requesting that the warrant article be tabled until the next meeting to allow the trustees time to finalize their own legal opinion, because you haven't seen it yet. We have found an attorney who has volunteered his time, and based on preliminary research of the original Constitution and bylaws, it appears that Anderson and Krieger never had the benefit of reviewing these documents. If they had, it would likely have impacted their entire legal analysis. These documents explain the purpose of the Citizens Library Association of West Acton and they grant the trustees named in the Constitution the authority to transact business on behalf of the Citizens Library. This is unusual because that's the way libraries work in Massachusetts, and there are examples of library associations where the town owns the building and then the trustees own the library. How much more time do I have?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. SJC case ruled that in matters of sovereignty that the boards and committees can hire their own counsel. It's a Wayland or Weston, one of the W towns. And so I urge you guys to wait. I feel like we are making good ground. I feel like just calling the library staff town staff instead of saying AML staff, it helps us bring to a better understanding of the respect of the people that want to be respected. And in terms of why the trustees, they're the ones they're caretakers. They caretake the ambiance. They help people learn everybody's names and just a different way of being. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I think I've heard a certain amount of anger from the board, and being a long-term resident of Acton, I think we're in a very, very unfortunate situation right now. You know, everybody that has taken up their own sides of this whole huge battle and conflict aren't necessarily chums that socialize and go out to dinner with each other. But many of us have known each other for many years. We've been on committees, scouts, soccer, all kinds of town events together, and suddenly we are embattled and angry. David, you sound so angry, and I'm so sorry you are. It's a terrible situation we're in. Unfortunately, there has never been a situation where we've sat down and tried to resolve this. I have asked for it many times to John. Could we sit down and talk about it? Come up with a compromise. Come up with a partnership. I will do anything to help make that happen. I think rushing to town meeting it feels so unfair. And I don't think it's going to do anything about the divisive nature of what we have right now. Nobody, and no matter what the trustees might feel, nobody has done a thing to change the current arrangement. I'm glad you have made your motion about how the hierarchy works right now. That's the way it has been working, and nothing the trustees have done has done anything to change that. We have not done anything to change how we interact with staff. It's clear the staff reports to Maria, and that's where the marching orders go, and we respect that for now. So it's been no one's intent to try and change that, despite how the trustees might feel. Please be assured. And again, my mistake for going into a staff area by walking around the edge of a desk. That was so insulting, to be called on the carpet for doing something like that. But see, that's what we've come to. There's just a lot of anger and frustration, and I will do anything I can to help mitigate that. Let's communicate. To try and resolve this in a couple of weeks before a town meeting, when there's no reason to. We're all adults. I think we can communicate and resolve it. I guess that's all. I mean, I could answer a number of comments that were made that were not only hurtful, but untrue. But I think it won't help the situation for me to try and address them and play a game of ping pong back and forth. People make comments like that to be hurtful because they're angry, and I understand that. I think if there's a way we can eliminate some of the anger, we all live in the same town. We have a great town. And again, we've all known each other for many, many years. And it's very tough to take a different side of an issue, but I think if we can sit down and talk about it and compromise and resolve issues, that has never happened. It's been talked about in this room about having a sit down and a talk and communicate. It hasn't happened. And a compromise. Can we do that? Please, I would be, I'll meet any time of any day, anywhere.
Thank you for your sentiment.
Hi, I'm Bob Miller, 84 Windsor Avenue, and first I want to say thank you for reading my email the other day, and Dean, thanks for your response. I appreciate the interpretation of the 4/5 rule. Back when I was in FinCom, we actually wanted to shut down the library for capital savings back in the late 90s, and we were told by town council that we couldn't do that. My understanding of the rule was that it carried over to all things regarding the library. But in any case, I do live on Windsor Avenue, and I'm concerned about the tenor, the scope, and the process, or the lack thereof. Now, I heard tonight that this seems to be an emergency event, that we got to have this passed because we can't run the library. Well, you know, I saw a wonderful package from the town library come out today regarding all the programs and systems and things that are offered to the town. I don't think that this article is going to impact or impede the ability of the town to run its libraries. I think, in fact, passing this or moving forward with this article, and I think you're passing the motion earlier about how to run things day to day makes sense, but pushing forward when you have left people in the lurch, and I say lurch only because people have tried to run the West Acton Citizen Memorial Library in a way. They nurtured it, they loved it since 1962. I've only been here since 1992. And I'll be frank, living on the street, I'm not an active user of the library. I think some of the new things that's happened in the library where you can get books delivered there via the Memorial Library computer system and other things are great. I think there's lots of opportunities for improvement, but it's about process. And I think rushing, and maybe you don't feel it's rushing, but you know, from a citizen's perspective, only becoming aware of what's going on in the last 4 to 5 weeks, why do you need to pass a warrant article to define the trustees' responsibilities or actually reduce officially the trustees' responsibilities now is necessary, especially when you have a temporary trustee or someone who is acting as temporary trustee and only recently appointed 2 new trustees this past week. No one's really had time to sort it all out. And yes, I understand the point about open meeting law. There's only 3 trustees. Well, there's ways to do that. When I was on the FinCom, we found ways to talk about capital budgets and finances and with members of all the committees. There's ways. You just have to announce that you're doing it. Let people come to it. I don't think that trustees, the Citizens Memorial Library, or the Acton Library would be afraid to talk about the issues about solving them in public. I think if we're worried about how to negotiate and solve and raise issues about how things are run and how we want to run them forward in public, if that's a threat, well, we probably should just shut the libraries down. So I really think you need to pause. I don't see a need for this warrant article right away. I agree with Jim's comments that let's get the parties together and work it out. There's nothing that we can't work out. These are all neighbors, we're all friends, and I'm most upset by watching former trustees cry, and I've seen that. Why are they crying? Why have they resigned? Thank you.
Thank you.
Another citizen coming up.
Thank you. Alyssa Nichols, School Street. I've been really uncomfortable with this entire process since I first became aware of it. I was uncomfortable when Annette was appointed. It was really difficult for me to sit in this room and watch movement and gesturing and leaving the room by staff and memorial trustees to talk and try and text and call and get the other people who had stepped forward here. It seems to be there was a lot of concern emanating from that activity, and it seemed strange to me, and I didn't feel comfortable with it. Similar to the process where the 2 new appointees were appointed. I've also spoken with some of the trustees who have resigned, and I'm uncomfortable with all of that. I'm not going to go into any details, but this process doesn't feel right. When I look at the 1962 warrant wording, it's very clear that there were 2 articles, one to establish funding for the west branch of the Memorial Library, and a second one to establish the Association Library, $300 for each, only if it was that inexpensive today. Anyway, library trustees are governed by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, and I understand that you've received an opinion from town council, but in my experience, you talk to 5 different attorneys and they will give you 5 different opinions. And I'm very uncomfortable also with moving ahead without reviewing this with maybe special counsel. I understand that there is some anger on the part of the board and the staff about the move to get some legal counsel weighing in on this, but I think it's reasonable. We had, 3 attorneys in here for the Piper Lane, and all 3 of them, town council, the applicant's attorney, and the neighbor's attorney, all 3 of them had a different opinion. So I think that we really shouldn't rush this. I keep hearing from staff and the board that they want to have a collaborative process, and having the town council draft up a bylaw and present it to the citizens trustees for comment. That's not collaboration, and it's certainly not consensus.
Thank you. Imogen.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to several of the things that were mentioned. So there was a comment made that there wasn't any attempt to build that consensus. That's not correct. I know for a fact that the town manager has been working with the chair of the trustees. I've sat in on those meetings. I think we can have more of those meetings, but that process has already started. Staff have been trying to work with the trustees as well. There has been more than just staff handing off a document to trustees and saying you need to approve this. There has been a back and forth, and that back and forth can continue. I think that there can be more of that, but that work has already started. Another thing that was mentioned is programming is still happening, so what's the effect? I would say program is happening despite all of the barriers that staff have had to face. I know for a fact that staff have been really stressed throughout this situation. There was mention of trustees being brought to tears. I can state for a fact that staff have been brought to tears, and it's been really hard to see how the situation has been affecting our residents, our staff. It's untenable. I think that the suggestion to modify the motion that we've just made about generalizing it to town staff is a good one. We do have a citizens manager that oversees the operations of that library. So I think that in this motion, generalizing it to town staff and saying that we're gonna have town staff operating the same way that the town manager had charged them to originally for the time being is a good one. I also do want to say that we also heard that legal opinions can differ. That's 100% true. We've seen, you go to one lawyer, they're going to say one thing. You go to another lawyer, they're going to say another thing. That's a standard thing, and we see that through everything. The most important thing to do is maintain a procedure that we've done up till now, because we're always going to have differing opinions, and as a town it's going to be impossible for every single time we need to get a legal opinion to consult 5-10 different voices. And so we have a procedure that's outlined, and I think that changing it or using a non-traditional approach, I think there would have to be I would have to see a substantial need for that to support that type of effort. I know that there has been work to contact a pro bono lawyer to get a different legal opinion. Again, every citizen's right. But I think that, for us as a board and what we're supporting moving forward, I think that keeping a standard is going to be really important because it sets a precedent. So that's what I wanted to say on that. I think the most important thing that we can do is make sure that staff feel supported and that we're establishing some more clarity moving forward. And I think that clarity needs to happen now. For me personally, I do want to state that I wouldn't feel comfortable approving the article as it's currently drafted. I do know that the trustees are meeting on Thursday. The town manager is also, there might be some additional changes. So for me, I would feel comfortable if we push this off to a next meeting. I realize there might be some difficulty with doing that, but even if it was like a special select board meeting that we were able to put together to approve this in time for us printing out the warrant, but also giving us time for the trustees to meet and have their feedback, I think that's what I would prefer. So that's where I stand on that. I wouldn't be comfortable voting yes today for the current article draft.
Thank you. David?
So, there's a lot of talk about collaboration and compromise, which is all well and good. But, two meetings ago, the citizens trustees together passed a motion that engaged legal counsel. This was not done by an individual. This was done at a public meeting. One meeting ago, they passed a set of bylaws that it says it works the way we want it to work. That's not collaboration, right? You just said the way it works. And so to pretend now like you've been trying to collaborate all this time is just not correct. Also, to pretend now that the issue was you stepped behind the counter once, that's not correct. So let's not go there.
Yes, Annette, please go ahead. Go ahead, Ann.
I have a suggestion. Since this is taking up staff time, not only a staff time of the library staff, but also staff time of the town manager. I suggest that you go forward with the article in the warrant because it has to be printed. And if you don't reach a compromise or have a little chit-chat or whatever you think you're going to have in time for town meeting, you can pass over the article. But we can move forward at least that far and get some, and stop this talking around in circles.
Thank you. Annette.
Thank you, Dean. Again, I would just really like to urge, Himaja, when you and I sat down with John, the way it ended was the most productive part of the meeting, when you suggested taking the two proposals and reaching a compromise. I understand that the town manager has his own marching orders, but the draft that he had proposed, that we had looked at, he was not in a position to change. And that has happened multiple times. He's been very generous to meet with me, and I've thanked him for that, and I've appreciated that. But he has been unable to compromise on the version that he had. So when there's no compromise possible, I don't know the reasons for that, but I would like us to compromise and collaborate and reach a consensus. I'm offering to do anything it takes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think we did pass the motion to instruct the town manager how we expect him to handle and control staff through his designees. That passed narrowly. If anyone has another motion that captures the same sort of a sense, I'd certainly entertain that. David.
So I'd like to vary that a little bit. Mr. Chair, would it be possible to have a special select board meeting before the printing deadline to approve a final wording to go into the warrant? And maybe could we tonight put in the last draft wording that the town council gave us, and then change that at that special select board meeting to whatever the town manager is able to come up with the trustees, by Friday, Monday noon time, whatever works in people's schedules?
So I take note of the fact the West Acton trustees are going to be meeting Thursday night. Now, initially, we were talking about a possible special select board meeting on the evening of Monday the 10th. However, there's a conflict there. I'd be amenable to a special meeting sometime during the day on the 10th. If we can get a quorum together, it can either be in person or Zoom, just to deal with this very narrow issue. But it all depends on what everybody else's schedule can accommodate.
So this meeting that we scheduled for the 12th was because there was a conflict on the 10th. The conflict on the 10th is a League of Women Voters event, which I believe is in this room, which I think starts at 7. So we could meet at 5:30, but I don't know if that's fair to what kind of setup needs to go on in here. I don't know if there's a big setup situation, or if we could meet for an hour and then clear out for that forum.
I'd be fine with doing that. Lisa, do we have any setup issues for if we meet for, you'll make it happen?
We could also do it like fully virtual if we want. Yeah, noon. Mm-hmm.
That would be okay.
That
with
works
me.
for me.
Yeah, I think we could do it at noontime on Monday here, just dealing with this particular issue. If that. And John, I guess that then begs the question, we talked about having another meeting on the 12th. Are we still going to have to do that, or is it?
Well, if you mentioned just this narrow issue, if you could expand the narrow issue to be the town meeting warrant, that might allow us, the board, time to make some final recommendations or positions on the warrant in one agenda item or two.
Okay.
And not have to meet on the 12th or the other day.
Okay. Everybody seems to like that idea. All right. So we will, I don't think we need to make any votes or decisions right now. We'll plan on holding this over until Monday at noontime. We'll have a meeting here. David?
How will we deal with Article 1?
That is still a subject of discussion that I was involved with the moderator and the town manager. I think more to come on that is the best I could say. Yes?
So I assume that doesn't have any printing deadlines because the whole issue is in the motion there.
That's the way it's looking, yes. But it's a sort of uncharted territory, so more information will be forthcoming.
That you change it from AML staff to town staff? Was anybody going to make that motion?
Yes, I can make that motion. Can I make a motion to amend an already approved motion, or would I make a new motion?
I think you could make a motion to amend, and I will most likely accept the amendment.
Excellent. I motion to quickly amend, changing it from AML staff to town staff in the motion that we just approved.
I'll accept that.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded for that amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions?
Nay.
Thank you. All right. Discuss water sampling near Public Works facility.
Yes, thank you. This article, sorry, not article, this item is just an update for the board. You may have seen in the last month or so, there was an article published by a local advocacy group regarding concerns in the water in the area near our Public Works facility, which is off Forest Road, kind of near Route 2. We saw that information and wanted to dig into it to determine whether there's something we need to be looking at as it relates to water quality. And so we had CEI, which is Comprehensive Environmental, Inc., do an analysis of some water sampling that was conducted in that area, and they found that some of the concerns that were raised in the public statement need some further investigation, but they also found that it appeared that a lot of the concerns with salt, or salinity is the scientific word for it, may have come from Route 2, which is a major highway with major road salting operations that happen throughout the winter. And also there's a whole stormwater system from the commercial areas near Route 2 that go towards the same area. So while it's certainly a concern that we have for the water quality, we don't necessarily believe that the concerns are directly related to our highway operations at the Public Works facility. I believe we put the memo in the packet, which has a much more detailed explanation of what I summarized, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
I noticed in the memo under next steps and recommendations, there were 6 actions to be considered as that they recommended that we consider as next steps. And I was wondering if you had your own thoughts about which of those 6, we should be taking up.
So this is something that we were going to be focusing on this spring and kind of looking more closely at, but if there's any initial suggestions from the board, that was partly the reason that I wanted to bring this to you tonight.
Well, I guess the one that stands out for me then would be okay to follow up on the consider options to improve the existing salt storage at the DPW facility, covered shed, flow diversion barriers, structural and non-structural best management practices, et cetera. And whether any of those are, which of those are urgent enough that we should consider changes now rather than wait many years before we have a new facility. And if it's the right timing for you is to consider this, when there's even, when it's even more spring than it is now, that's fine with me. But it would be great to know that we were going to be looking into that this year.
Yes, we will be looking into any short-term measures that we can take, leading up to next winter, or in the meantime, with regards to how we manage our salt on site.
Yeah, I'll amplify that a bit. The salt shed that's there now is a considerable upgrade than the one that was there from when the building was first constructed. It is constructed in such a way that the materials are contained much more comprehensively inside the building. But certainly, this whole issue is something that the Public Works Facilities Study Committee have been focused on. We're aware of the issue, and part of the request that we'll be looking for, about $1.2 million to do the next stage of design. Certainly, site plan, stormwater management, all of those things would certainly be very high on the priority list. As far as, operational issues, I'd leave that to the town manager and his staff. But I can certainly tell you that from what I've observed, it's a much cleaner operation now than it has been in the past. But, all these things always could be cleaner. David?
Yeah, I think before we take remedial action at the DPW facility, we should know that the salt is coming from that facility, right? I think, when we reconstructed DPW facility, we wanted, do the best we can and, currently the best available practices to contain the salt. But if we need to do something in the meantime, I'd like to know that that really was caused by us. Just out of curiosity, do we use the same kind of salt that the state does? Has anybody done that to say what kind of salt is in the brook? I'm pretty sure we use magnesium chloride sprayed with calcium chloride. And so I don't know, whether the state also uses that because it's the general practice and so we can't tell, or can we tell because the state uses something else?
We can look at that. I don't know that we'd be able to determine that from the sampling, but it's certainly, that's a good suggestion. And we can, I'll mention that to the team.
Because the current salt shed looks like it's intact to me. I mean, the salt is dry. It doesn't look like it needs washing away. I mean, possibly, when it's loaded in, some goes on the edges of the truck, which spills outside the facility and then washes away. And we should be careful with that. But, I'd want to make sure that we have sloppy practices before we correct them.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the public?
Hi, I'm Kim Castens from Pope Road, and I wrote the article that was on the Green Acton website that talked about the road salt. And the sequence is a little bit more complicated than that. So Green Acton did, together with ORS, did a first round of measurements in June of 2021. And on the basis of that, I presented those data at a Green Advisory Board meeting, and that was where the town became aware of it, and we shared all the data that we had collected, and I emailed you guys, and so you had that first round of data. And on the basis of that, the town contracted with CEI. And I want to first of all say that I'm really grateful that the town took the data so seriously that we had gotten from this conductivity survey. So the memo that's in the DocuShare is from January of this year, which is before the new Green Acton article was published. Because we did a second round of data collection in November of last year, 2022. And on the basis of that, and then we sent that information to John, and there's a subsequent memo which John sent to me dated March 9th, which is subsequent to the Green Acton publication on road salt danger, and it's based on the 2021 data collected by Green Acton and ORS, the 2022 data collected by Green Acton and ORS, plus the December 2022 data collected by CEI. So there's 3 sets of data that are incorporated in the more recent memo. And the more recent memo is quite clear that sampling data collected by both CEI and ORS indicates that specific conductivity within Coles Brook is high. Throughout the, indicates the DPW facility may be a potential contributor of road salt to Coles Brook, as evidenced by the large rise in specific conductivity between stations 6 and 7. So when the brook leaves the south end of the Arboretum, the level of conductivity was 350 microsiemens per centimeter, so that's the unit, and anything above 500 is considered dangerous to aquatic life. So that same stream comes down, and when it's adjacent to the DPW site, it's 1,632. So it goes from 343 Mary's Brook when it leaves the Arboretum. It goes south, it comes past the DPW system, the site, and it's up above 1,632. So, I mean, I would give you this map. It's quite clear and unambiguous that the source is between the green dot and the red dot, which is the DPW site. So there needs to be some more thought put into this. I think it's appropriate to be careful and cautious. There's some additional data which I have offered to John, but we haven't had a chance to look at together from some bottle samples that we took the same time that we did the conductivity. So I think that further attention to this is needed. I'm glad the town is taking it seriously. And you should look at the second memo as well as the first before you conclude.
Chair, can I ask
Go ahead.
Ask a question? I assume because you're measuring connectivity, it's actually difficult to test out the salts. Is that,
okay.
Is that right?
Conductivity is free. So basically,
Right.
ORS has the equipment. ORS sends out water volunteers, including me, once a month, to sample all over the Suasco watershed, at which time we measure in situ measures as well as take bottle samples. And so ORS has over 20 years established a correlation curve between sodium chloride and conductivity. So ORS lends the equipment to their water quality volunteers to go out and do these high-resolution surveys of tributaries, because there's only 2 sites in all of Acton that are measured on a monthly basis by ORS volunteers. And so basically, to fill in the details in between, they basically empower field parties to go out and do these high-resolution surveys. But there's a good correlation made between the two. So we did collect bottle samples on our second field expedition, and we confirmed that the chloride content and the conductivity content on the approximately 10 sites where we did both fell on the correlation curve that ORS has developed over time. So in other words, we did 28 sites in one day with conductivity, basically just with the loan of the equipment. So we also did one sample adjacent to the DPW site where we did a full suite of analyses there as well.
So I understand that it's easy, but we might need a little bit more. I mean, I'm not, disputing the findings you found. I think we're going to need more information. As far as I know, the town doesn't use sodium chloride. And so you have this correlation, but it may or may not be exactly the same for magnesium chloride. And then we use some calcium chloride at very low temperatures. So, I mean, that's just, for future, we need to figure out get a little bit more information. I'm also wondering in whether there's data published, and I haven't tried to research this myself. I could do it with a Google search, I suppose, but is there a kind of salt that's considered less environmentally damaging? Because there is some choices in road salts, and, is one better than the other, or I don't know the answer to that.
As far as I know, all the deicers are chloride salts, and so the correlation that ORS has established is between chloride and conductivity. So sodium becomes important because sodium is a health risk. So ORS also measures sodium. So, okay, but thank you for taking this all seriously, and I look forward to further discussion about both the data collected by Green Acton and the data collected by the consultant that you guys hired. And thank you for taking it so seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Nichols, School Street. I just want to echo Kim's thanks to the town staff for hiring CEI. To Jim's point about the recommendations that were in that memo and improving the existing salt storage at the DPW site, I understand that you want to be really careful that when you go to fix a problem, that the problem actually exists. And I was happy to have a tour of that facility on Saturday, and the salt shed is, the building is beautiful and it's all dry, but that is the shed for the town. And wasn't part of the tour was the facility that stores the salt that the residents can come and use, and it's my understanding that that is not covered. So I would look very carefully, in addition to this additional testing that they've recommended next summer, to look at what they've recommended for that particular salt storage, not waiting until the DPW renovation happens. So making sure that it's covered and there are barriers to it flowing away. Thanks.
Thank you. Jim.
Just a couple last thoughts. As we investigate this further, it's relevant to note that the Water District has for many years noted the rise in salt levels in the drinking water, in the winter season when the road crews are out. Those levels are low enough for most people. There are some extremely salt-sensitive people who need to understand the levels, so that's why the Water District publishes the information about the exact levels. The other question about, is there salt that, is less harmful? Well, one choice like towns like Lincoln do is they don't salt. They have the very scary signs that say, you're entering a part of the road system where, we're not going to be using salt here, so be careful. And that's a choice they've made to protect their drinking water. Their drinking water system is different than Acton's, so it may not be something that Acton needs to do, but it is an option for us to be looking at. The last thing I thought I should mention is that, full disclosure, I am part of Green Acton. But I'm not on the Green Acton Water Committee. I did get to go out and walk with Kim and sort of identify a trail to the sample, but I haven't taken any samples. So I just thought that should be clear, that I'm somewhat peripherally involved in this stuff.
Thank you. David.
Just one other really quick thing. Another reason to know that the type of salt is the magnesium chloride we use as a solid, the calcium chloride we use as a liquid. If we have a handling problem, it may be associated with one or the other. And so it would be interesting to know which is what.
And I'll further note, in years past, what's been applied on the streets in the past has been a mixture of sand and salt. And that was eliminated due to environmental concerns of the silica being released from the sand, and to say nothing of the huge cleanup cost. They tried to make things better, and they probably did, but all of these trade-offs all have a lot of long-term implications. Fran? Heminger.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, in terms of the next steps that are outlined, I do agree with them. And then to add to what everyone's been saying, adding in potentially a next step of doing a further investigation into what sources, or what type of salt is predominantly causing this rise in conduction in our water, and then potentially what those sources might be. But other than that, this looks like a good list.
Thank you. Item 7, update on Department of Public Works building project. John?
This is very, very much related to the previous discussion because it's the site of the Department of Public Works, which is currently There's a committee that the select board created. This was one of the top goals of the select board this year, to advance the design. And so the committee has recommended, and the board, I believe, approved that recommendation to move forward with an article at town meeting to get the project to 60% design, which is pretty typical in major building projects like this. You want to do a conceptual design, which we've done a little bit of as part of the feasibility work, and then you want to take it to the next level of design before you then go to the town and say, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is why it's a great idea. We need to do this intermediate step of figuring out, is it X thousand square feet, or is it X minus a few thousand square feet, and what exactly do we need? What does it look like? How does it actually sit onto the site? Where are we going to put the fuel depot? All the things that go into the next phase of design, which we would plan to do if approved. And then, the thing that I say often with building projects in an organization like this that's been around since the 1700s, we expect it to be around for much longer, right? And the roads that we've built, the sidewalks that we want to continue to build, the parks that we want to build, the parks that we have, and all the assets and infrastructure that supports all those. The stormwater, we just talked about stormwater. Every year, we need to be investing in more stormwater systems, the underground systems, the catch basins, the outfalls. All that stuff needs to be maintained by somebody. And so those assets are going to have to be maintained, I'm guessing, for hundreds of years. Maybe not. But if I'm right, then we're going to need staff to do it, equipment to do it, and all those people and equipment needs to be in a facility. And the one that we built in the 60s is not going to last us that long. So every year we don't build a building, I think this is a fact. Every year we don't build a building, it gets more expensive. And so we certainly could defer this whole idea, and we maybe come up with a better idea 10 years from now, but it's probably going to be a lot more expensive to do the better idea than, I think, whatever idea we have now. So it's a community decision. This community values its services. It values its infrastructure. It values its roads. I think it values them being treated so they're safe. I think they value all the things that we do. And the people that work in that building have an inadequate facility. And they certainly they're not banging down my door complaining about it. But anyone that's been through there knows that it is not an adequate facility. And most other facilities that we have in this, I would say every other facility we have in this organization are suited to what we're trying to do, and that one isn't. So I look forward to the board working with us to move this forward, and we're going to the Finance Committee tomorrow night to talk to them about this project. And I know, Dean, you led a tour on Saturday, and I wasn't there. I was at 6 different baseball games, but I would be curious to hear how it went, and if you wanted to update the board on that.
Sure. So, when we talk about the significance of what Public Works employees do, I mean, Public Works employees, their activities touch every single individual in the town. Some people use libraries, some people don't. Some people have kids to go to school, some people don't. But everybody that lives here is impacted directly by the work of Public Works. Having the roads open, having the parks cleared, properly maintained, having all of the rest of our infrastructure done properly. We're under federal and state mandates for our stormwater management. Every single employee, every single person that lives in this town is impacted by that directly. We pay lots of taxes to support all of these other facilities. There'd be schools, libraries, fire department. Hopefully nobody ever has to use the fire department, but we put a lot of money into that because people do. So everybody is going to benefit from this facility. As far as the tour goes, it was a rainy, absolutely miserable day. But we did do a walkthrough. We had a couple of select board members. We had some members of the finance committee. We had members of the public that came through. Corey York and Jason Kidder from DPW were kind of the on-scene experts for what's going on. I could tell them, everybody, what happened there 8 years ago, but they could say what's happening now. The building hasn't gotten any better since I left. Just not a surprise. It continues to age. Some of the things that we need to be thinking about if we don't do this project is, the roof is close to the end of its lifespan. We still have the real seismic problems on the fact it's an unreinforced masonry building. We still have the issue that it's a building that was actually undersized for the needs of the town in 1969, when the population was half of what it is now, and the road miles was probably a third less. And entire operations that people never even considered now operate out of there. So it's just time, folks. The Acton Community TV did send Mark Ducey was down there, filmed it. I understand that the film has been edited and is out and available. So I'd recommend people take a look at it. And certainly as we move forward, if there's a need at some point to have another public engagement process down there at the site, why, I'd certainly be amenable to it, and I know Public Works will be looking forward to it. So it's just, this is sort of the last really piece of old and decrepit infrastructure we've got in town. It needs to be fixed. Any questions? David?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of moving ahead with the design of this. I think we need to get a straw man so that we can, figure out what's what. Personally, I'm committed, and I've spoken to the town manager about this, to get the highest value facility we can get. But also, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to compromise. I think it wants to be a good value, but we don't want to undersize it again at the beginning. You want to make the compromises, 30 years down the road when it's not adequate, not day one. And right now it's in a situation where it's really unfair to the employees at a number of levels. They're asked to do a lot of work. They don't have a facility that helps them do that work. Even really some basics, right? There are, the air quality is not up to scratch because of the way the ventilation systems work and the way the vehicles are. The building has vermin in it, right? There are inadequate facilities for women employees in that building. And I'm told that we've had applications for some women and they choose not to come to our town. And it's not surprising, the male road crews can go into a locker, not that it's a luxury locker or anything, but they can go into a locker and shower before heading home and wash the asphalt off themselves or whatever they've been working on for the day. There is no such thing for for women at the facility. And I think one thing that has been clear to me, or I've come to recognize the value in, is the co-location of the DPW facility employees for communication, so that the crews can easily talk to the supervisors when they come back. The crews can talk to the engineers when they come back and say that sidewalk we're working on looks like this corner up here is not going to be working right when we get to it next week. And so the engineer can fix that, and having that informal kind of conversation there, it makes a huge, or the mechanics in the same place. So when they come back with a piece of equipment and say, the bucket doesn't go all the way up anymore. or whatever the thing is. So I think that co-location is very valuable.
Fran?
The tour was so eye-opening because the conditions are not only unsafe, but in the real estate business, like, the building is past its useful life, in my opinion. And I had no idea DPW workers sleep overnight on couches to plow the next day during storms, and with mouse traps, at their heads. So there are several safety issues, and I think it's time. I'm all for plowing ahead with the design.
Thank you. Jim?
There's the DPW committee report, which is a good way to learn about, this. Is there now a good sort of shorter version that we can use to, talk to groups or show to groups that, outlines the issues? I'm thinking about, when we did the work to do the Kelly's Corner changes, that was, there was presentations, there were meetings, this brought together a lot of people because we're spending a lot of money. And we might not need that push right now because this is only $1 million to do the design, but, we have to be headed in that direction. We need a really short, compelling presentation so that, when it comes time to the bigger bucks, we're ready. So what would you recommend now if someone asked for questions about, I'd like to spend 5 minutes and learn more about this DPW facility. What can we do?
Well, obviously the Weston Sampson report that you refer to is, that's the most authoritative, and that's available on the town website. And, you can actually leaf through it pretty quick. There's an executive summary, and then you can drill down through all of the pages for all of the individual sections, and you can see a lot of the compromises and discussions that have gone on. There's obviously the report from the Public Works Facilities Committee, which came here, but, that doesn't give you a lot of details. So I think those are the Weston Sampson report is sort of the gold standard, and that is available on the town website. That's probably the best place to start. Certainly, moving forward, the folks on the committee are interested in doing more outreach. This was sort of the first attempt to get it. What I kept running into was people would come up during the tour and they'd say, well, what's this going to be like, and what's that going to be like, and, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Well, a lot of it is, that's why we need the money, is so that we can get you some ideas. Have you thought about geothermal energy for it? Have you thought about, there's so many different decision points that have to be made that, that's why we need this $1 million, is to really get some good detail down on it. So, more to come. John?
I guess I just wanted to also take the opportunity to talk about the fuel depot, because it was actually a question that came up over the weekend. So the fuel depot is, if you've ever been to the site, it's that little shack that's next to in between the salt shed and the transfer station, and it's in the middle of the site. And it's used by all of our public works vehicles, the fire department, the police department, any municipal building vehicles here, but it's also used by the Acton Boxborough Regional School District and all their work trucks and the community ed driving school. All those things are all fueled up there, and the school buses, and then the Case Collaborative, which they have 100 vans or some large number of vans that they use for the whole collaborative between Concord, Acton, Sudbury, and some other people. They all fuel up there too. So, it's, as I mentioned, it's right in the middle of the site. So, and it's nearing end of life, which is actually a more urgent problem than the Public Works building nearing end of life, because it's an underground storage tank. So that is something that the board earlier this year, or I guess late last year, voted to approve $250,000 of ARPA funding to expedite the design of the relocation of the fuel depot. Ideally, it's not going to be where it is now, because it messes up the whole site. So as part of the larger project to design a new facility and a new site, we're going to also move the fuel depot. We need to do that in the next few years. So the funding that's been set aside from ARPA will expedite that process, and we'll have to come back next year to fund it because it's going to be an expensive project. That's going to run a parallel track to the larger building project of what we just can't necessarily wait to do both at the same time. So I just wanted to make sure if there's any questions about that from the board. I wanted to make sure it was well understood here because it isn't necessarily out in the public. Yes.
So what I recall, but I wanted to make sure I remembered this right, is the location of this facility is wide open, right? I mean, we know it won't be exactly where it is now, but it doesn't even have to be on that site at all, right? If there's some appropriate site that works somewhere else?
At this point, we're not looking on other properties in town. That's a central location that seems to work well. From a location point, it's just not a great place to have it on the site.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally, it would be closer to one of the exits.
Okay.
So no, there's no, that I'm aware of, any movement to put it somewhere else in town.
Okay. The only thing I would maybe suggest that it be in the back of your mind is that if the schools do find a permanent location for their school buses instead of rented land, then, hey, a couple of big above-ground tanks might be just right for them. And then the town vehicles could go visit the school buses and get their gas there. But, just an idea, not a requirement, just a thought. So good luck.
Fran?
At the tour, I just thought I'd add a comparison to Westford's DPW and, the potential and what ours currently looks like. And the fuel pump station has such a great canopy over it. It's just very, very efficient. And that's all I had to add. So I'm sure that's on the website, the town website.
So, yeah, following up on that, the Westford situation, it is all above ground, double wall tanks. I think, that's where most public works operations are going to. One of the nice things about the facility right now at Forest Road is that it is geographically central to the town. And that's, especially important, where we're fueling up police cruisers, fire trucks. It is nice to, from an operational point of view, to be able to fuel vehicles up, highway department vehicles coming back at the end of the day, getting them all fueled up and having them right there. And certainly having on-site monitoring is very important as well. Where the thing is, they've got the monitoring so they know when they're having issues with, need more fuel to order, whatever. So it's good that it be kind of right there. And, no matter what happens in the green environment, we're going to be using fossil fuel for vehicles for quite a long time. Certainly well beyond the expected lifespan of the tanks that exist right now, which is pretty short. Okay. What I'd like to do is skip ahead to the commuter parking lot fees.
This is a request. I believe there's a motion drafted from Teresa O'Leary, our treasurer collector. The activity at the commuter lots are picking up a little bit, and as you know, the board approved a reduced rate for the reserve spaces just to keep people in the game. And now we're in a position where, as the demand is increasing, we can go back closer to the rates that were initially set with the intent of operating the program the way it should be run. And so the recommendation is in your packet, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, questions to Jim?
Am I remembering right that the commuter van is paid for out of those parking fees? I mean, I know we've suspended that program, so I'm hoping that raising the fees will be part of a solution that allows us to run those commuter vans again.
Yes, certainly the revenue the shortfall in revenue over the last 3 years has impacted our ability to subsidize transportation in the way that we had it set up before, and hopefully this will get us closer to being able to do that in the future.
I also, my recollection is when we purchased the Maple Street property, we were contemplating the income from those parking spaces to pay off the note on Maple Street. So I think that's a big nugget to worry about as well. So, other questions? Could I get a motion? David?
I move to set the reserved parking rates for both Maple Street lot and, for both Maple Street lots at $120 per month and the Jonesfield lot at $50 per month through September 30th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Considering that we've scheduled another meeting for Monday to deal with some more of these town meeting articles, and considering that the hour and that we still have the town manager's review, unless people have some burning desire to go over the articles, I'd prefer to pass that over. Everybody seems amenable to that? Okay. Town manager review. So the town manager review document, the process, as you all know, everyone got an opportunity to fill out an evaluation. Those evaluations were submitted back to me. I compiled all of the comments. I calculated all of the various votes and points, and that produced this document here, which was released late last week and went public to the town manager and to the board all simultaneously. There's been, to the best of my knowledge, there's been no discussion by anybody about this. So I'll kind of, a couple of the comments that I would make, there were a number of points in which select board members were given the opportunity to provide narratives, and I have compiled every single narrative point. As per the process, there's no identifiers as to who raised any of these points. But I was struck as I was assembling all this, how uniform everybody's discussions were. The points that were raised, they all seem to be, I think we have a real consensus on the value and the work of the town manager. As to the numbers, this is for the benefit of the public, because you folks all know it, the 34 criteria points. Each point could be scored using an E for excellent, M for meets, and I for improvement needed. Combining all these scores, there were up to 136 votes were possible. John received 122 excellent votes and only 14 meets votes and no I votes. So I think it is a tremendously positive review, as was his due. But that's what I've done. I hopefully have captured all of the information. If there's any members of the board wish to make comments on this and amplify it, please let me know. David?
So, thank you. I read through this this morning, and I think it's, I agree with it all, and thank you, John, for all your work. I think these comments generally reflect my sentiment that you're doing a great job, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I don't think we take enough opportunities to thank each other and people for what they do. So, John, thank you. You're doing a great job. Just want to make sure you know that and that we know it. And a question I have, I think, maybe for the chair is, or for John, is what process do we want to go through to take these wonderful but too long list of suggested goals for next year and turn them into something shorter?
So I think that, in order to do that properly, it would end up having to be another open meeting of the board. Looking at time constraints between now and town meeting, I'd certainly be happy to have another meeting to go over this. It's just the press of time. So I'm open to suggestions. David?
So I think maybe you, Dean, or somebody it seems to me that there are some goals here which would have to be in our goals list to be acted upon, right? Pursue the design of a DPW facility. I think we agree on that one, but that's a town action goal. Then there's development goals, right? And those are the ones I think that really belong here, like continue to develop new programs to recruit and retain talented staff, right? That's not going to be one of our, action goals in June or whatever we do that process. So I think we need to, split the personal development goals from the town action goals. And the town action goals really don't belong here, and in my opinion. And then the personal action goals do, and maybe we could, after separating them into two buckets, we could just go through and see whether in a public meeting, if there's any that we'd like to add, delete, change. But I think there'll be fewer than half.
Imogen?
Yeah, I echo David. I think that having a separate meeting to talk about select board goals, especially before some of us, term off, that would be great. And then in terms of just thanking the town manager, thank you for your leadership and for your continued advocacy for staff, for residents. I agree with everything that's here. But yeah, really looking forward to next steps and really excited for this next year and all it has to offer.
Thank you. So I think what I'll do is, as we set up our agendas for our next couple of meetings, we'll see if we can carve out a piece of time to go over this. What I might do as chair is go through this list and split it up into the two buckets that David suggests, and see where it goes. And then once we have the discussion in an open session with the members of the board, we could vote on these things. And then obviously, a lot of these goals are probably going to be showing up again at our goal-setting meeting for the town in June. So I guess, the other thing that I would say is just to reiterate what my colleagues have said, John. We're very pleased with your work. And we think you've done a great job. As you look through this, and certainly members of the public are welcome to do this, you don't see a lot of yeah buts here. We really think that you're doing an excellent job, and we look forward to the next step of this, which is negotiating with you. John, would you like to provide a rebuttal to my comments?
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate and it's a great honor to be the town manager here. It's been 5 years since I think I was appointed in April 5 years ago, and I started in that July, but I kind of started in my head in April of that year. So it's been 5 years, and I really enjoyed working with this board and all the other boards, and I just thank you for the feedback, and I want to continue to grow and continue to build up this organization, staffing, and continue engaging with our active volunteers, and getting more people to the table is something that's a priority for me, internally and externally. I think we have 25,000 people here, and we only know 350 of them. And I think that's something that I'm committed to figuring out how to improve on. So, and thank you all for your feedback and kind remarks tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Consent. Item 11, accept donation from Angela DeAndrea for $10 towards the senior/disabled fund. Item 12, accept donation from Direct Access Therapy for $500 towards the 2023 Summer Concert Series and special events. Number 13, accept donation from the Church of the Good Shepherd for $100 towards the Acton Pride Festival. Item 14, approve a special farmer winery license application for Bliss Point Meadery for the 2023 Acton Boxborough Farmers Market. Number 15, accept donation from Prestigious Tree and Landscaping for $500 towards the 2023 Summer Concert Series and events. Number 16, appoint James D. Conboy to the Board of Registrars with a term to end in 2026. Number 17, appoint Timothy Shea to the Board of Registrars with a term to end in 2024 to fill the unexpired term of Thomas Beals. Number 18, accept donation from Revolution Community Yoga for $1,000 towards the 2023 Summer Concert Series and special events. I'll entertain a motion to accept consent items number 11 through 18 inclusive.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I'll accept one more motion.
Move to adjourn?
Get a second?
Oh, second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.